All right, what's going on? It is drive time. It is a Monday. It's about 9 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully, you had a fantastic weekend. And we have a jam packed Monday show for you on a historic day at the John M. Huntsman Center here on the campus of the University of Utah. We are preparing for tonight's introductory press conference where Alex Jensen will be officially introduced as the 17th head coach in the history of the Utah men's basketball program. So, a lot of the show today will be focusing on what hopefully is the beginning of a very special time for Utah fans and fans of Utah basketball that have been eager to see this program restored to its rightful place among the elites in the country. So we'll talk about it on the program today. We got a lot to do on a Monday afternoon. Good guest list for you guys. Of course, it is the madness of March. We're flying blind a little bit today to start off the show. I've got no internet access, so bear with me. So it is the Ides of March. The madness of March is upon us. Brigham Young University knows their seed. They know their destination. They know their opponent, as does Utah State. And for the fourth time in 4 years, the Utah women are dancing. They're going to the NCAA tournament where they will see Indiana in round one. And should they advance past Indiana during round one, they will play the defending national champs, Don Staley and South Carolina. So, of course, a lot of college hoops as it is St. Patrick's Day. It is March Madness. So we'll get to all the matchups. We'll break them all down. Let you know kind of what you can watch for. We have our station NCAA March Madness Bracket Challenge, as we do every year. Would encourage you to go to ESPN700sports.com to register and then play along against us on the station. We have some fun surprise celebrity guests that will be filling out brackets this year as well. You can play against some of our NBA Daily Assist guys like Tim McMahon and Dave McMiniman and others. And you have a chance to win some cash. So we'll tell you exactly how you're able to do that on the program today as Alonzo is making miracles happen. Per usual, we are online. We are ready to go. Give you some bracket tips. I'm not going to fill out my bracket until Thursday because the tournament doesn't start until Thursday. We'll get Porter's take on that later on the program. But college basketball on the show today. We'll do a little Utah Jazz, a little NBA. The worst team in the NBA plays its basketball in Salt Lake City. The Utah Jazz officially have the worst record in the NBA. The Washington Wizards on a sparkling two-game winning streak. And the Jazz are now 15-53, high speed ahead to hopefully a little lottery luck, a little lady lottery luck, the likes of which we have never had here in Salt Lake City. So the latest on the Jazz, the latest on the landscape of the NBA. Is this the year of Rory McIlroy on the PGA Tour? Rory McIlroy beats J.J. Spaun in the playoff this morning, actually, after it was delayed, to win his second Players' Championship. Rory is the fourth golfer all time to have both multiple Players' titles and multiple major championships. He's the eighth golfer all time to win this tournament multiple times. So a little golf on the show today, as most people believe. The Players' Championship, the fifth major as it's known, and maybe eventually a major championship of its own, but only time will tell. The latest in pro football, the Cincinnati Bengals locked in both of their wide receivers. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins have both been extended. Now all eyes on Trey Hendrickson. Some local players making some moves last week, namely Cody Barton, namely Zach Wilson, some other players like Bobby Wagner staying pat. So the latest in the landscape of the offseason in professional football on the program as well. We'll keep you up to date on any news that comes our way. The Utah Hockey Club with one of their biggest wins of the season on the road, taking on Vancouver, getting a good 3-1 win there, and they are right in the mix. It's I hate to be that guy. It's going to be tough. I'm not sure that I'm predicting a playoff opportunity for the Utah Hockey Club, but we'll see. They're right there. They're in the fight, and they're going to take on Edmonton in Alberta coming up tomorrow. So a little hockey, of course, as well, as the playoffs are right around the corner. Jam-packed sports weekend behind us. Real Salt Lake was able to go down to Houston and get a win, which they rarely do. So maybe answering some questions. Houston off to a pretty poor start, but RSL able to get that win over the weekend. So a lot to do on the program today. Great time of year. Love this time of year. We're high speed ahead to the Masters. We are high speed ahead to the stretch run of the NBA playoffs. But, of course, the madness of March will give you some tips to fill out your brackets, help you out this week on the program. Live today from the John M. Huntsman Center on the campus of the University of Utah on a beautiful March day. It's about 60 degrees, a little windy, but a little sunshine on a Monday afternoon after a pretty chilly weekend. We've got a pretty temperate week ahead. It's March in Utah. If you don't like the weather, just go ahead and wait 15 minutes. But a beautiful day today to get you through the start of your week. All right, our first guest on a Monday afternoon, Josh Furlong, covers the University of Utah for KSL. Get Josh's take on what hopefully is the beginning of a really fun run for Utah basketball, and certainly a historic day as Alex Jensen gets set to be introduced as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. We'll move over to Roxy Bernstein, who called a grip of Big 12 championship games in the tournament. Roxy has been in this building several times calling Ute games, so we'll get the landscape of college basketball with Roxy Bernstein. Head coach of the Utah women's basketball program, Gavin Peterson, will join us live on site today as the Utah women are in the NCAA tournament for the fourth time in 4 years as an 8 seed taking on the 9 seed Indiana. And as I referenced earlier, should they win, they're going to take on Don Staley in South Carolina, a powerhouse women's basketball program. And then from there, we're a little bit fluid with guests that may stop by, that may not stop by, that may join us on the phone, that may not. But right now we have Josh Furlong, we have Roxy Bernstein, we have Gavin Peterson. There are a bunch of Ute alums. They're going to be making their way inside the building. Maybe we'll convince some of them to stop by on the program. You never know. Little surprise element of the show on a Monday. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. And Porter Larson, who understands without any debate that the NCAA tournament begins on Thursday afternoon. Hello, Porter. How are you?
I'm doing well, Spencer. I'm doing very well.
Don't do it. I know you're considering it. Don't do it. The tournament starts on Thursday, and you know it does.
Listen, this is your show. You make the rules 2 to 6 live, no exceptions, every weekday. But the postseason does start tomorrow. I don't know what you want to, how you want to delineate
that's
it.
Fine. That's fine. That's fine. I don't give a rip. Sure, but the NCAA tournament starts on Thursday when the field of 64 is set.
Okay.
You understand that, right?
I get what you're saying, but the two teams that will play, the one will win and advance, and the other one will lose and go home. It feels tournament-esque.
And what do they advance? And what do they advance to?
The next round, which they call actually the second round of the NCAA
tournament.
No,
they advance to the NCAA tournament, which starts on Thursday. You do this every year. And you you need to understand that you're on an island alone. This is your sports equivalent of pineapple on pizza, and pineapple does not belong on pizza unless you're a socialist. We've been over this.
Well, I guess those are two hills that I'm kind of willing to plant my flag on, but hey, to each their own. All
right, fair enough. Fair enough. Porter Larson producing the program today back at our Broadway Media Studios. All right, our first guest right out of the gates, Josh Furlong, covers the University of Utah for KSL. But before we get to Josh, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks, it is the best place to get action on sports in more than 30 states. Obviously, with March Madness upon us, Prize Picks will be percolating. You can use Prize Picks in California, Texas, Georgia, Utah as well. The app is super easy to use. All you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. For instance, the Jazz are in action tonight, taking on the Chicago Bulls. So for tonight, for the Jazz, you could say Lauri Markkanen, more or less than 19.5 points. Nick Vucevic, more or less than 9.5 rebounds. It's really easy. If you've ever been interested in trying to maybe put a little cheddar on sports, you don't have to learn what the spread is, what the over-under means, any of that stuff. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 at checkout, and you get $50 when you play your first $5 bet. You do not even have to win the $5 bet to get the $50. It is free. So as I say, go get their free money, see if you like it, and go from there. All right, it is a historic day here at the John M. Huntsman Center as Alex Jensen is set to be introduced as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. So stay tuned for that. It's going to get rolling about 6 o'clock right after we say good night on this program. I'm not exactly sure who's going to speak. Our guy Riles will MC the event, the voice of the Utes. Then couple of seats in front of the dais where I'm at right now. Send out a couple of pictures on the Instagram page if you're interested. So my guess is those seats will be filled by Alex Jensen, obviously, and Mark Harlan would be my guess. So we'll see if we can grab any of the guests that are here today as we're broadcasting up until about 6 o'clock tonight. I've already seen a lot of former Utes. I imagine we're going to see a lot of those Utes from the heyday era in the 90s. Josh Grant, Jimmy Soto. I'm sure we'll see the Johnson brothers, hopefully Andre Miller. Will we get an Andre Miller sighting? There continues to be rumors swirling that as Alex Jensen approaches the task of filling out his staff, Andre Miller certainly is an option to sit next to him potentially as the lead assistant. Now, I don't know what Alex's staff is going to look like. I do push back on the narrative that has to be all Ute guys, right? Obviously, Mark Harlan's approach to this decision was a little bit of a far cry from the way he approached the hire that landed him on Craig Smith. And I talked about this with Sean a little bit during Crosstalk. Ultimately, after the book on Alex Jensen is written as the Utah head coach, today will not be remembered the same way that, games will be remembered, and hopefully wins will be remembered, and hopefully tournament runs and appearances will be remembered. But I feel like this is a little bit of a shot of adrenaline in the arm of a basketball community that more or less has been dormant for about 20 years, if we're honest, okay? Today feels like that it will be a press conference that is won. And while I don't usually give a rip about any of that, see Nick Sirianni's opening presser as the Eagles head coach, and they just won the Super Bowl. I'm told that a lot of deposits have been put down for season tickets next year. I'm told there's a tremendous amount of excitement within the athletic department. And from my vantage point, whatever part of this ecosystem you exist in, and chances are if you're listening to this show, you're probably a Ute fan of some sort. Maybe you're a season ticket holder, maybe you're a donor, maybe you're a booster, maybe you're a current student, maybe you're a former student, maybe you're just part of the community. Whether you played for the school, whether you're in the athletic department, whether you're an alum, a current student, or if you just cover the team like I do, this seems to be mostly consistently received as a big win right away. And for a team that hasn't played in front of jam-packed crowds consistently for a number of years, and a community that for whatever reason has just been disinterested in Utah basketball, it feels like a day like today is a good step in the right direction. And obviously the hope is, as we move forward, Alex is either able to retain some of the talent on the roster or go throughout his business in the transfer portal. He's going to have to re-recruit some kids that were looking to come here anyway. Can Alex capitalize on some of the in-state talent that is really, really good during the next couple of years to motivate them to play basketball for the University of Utah instead of the other myriad of options that they have at their disposal, namely a program right now in Provo and BYU that really has a ticking and has tremendous support from their, I think it's the Royal Blue Collective, where I've been told they have 9 7-figure donors ready to step up and pay coaches and pay players, and we're already seeing that mostly with their basketball program. The football program, ironically enough, is apparently not receiving the same support the basketball program is, but BYU with the number 1 recruit in the country next year, and AJ DeBansa, they're an NCAA tournament team as a 6 seed taking on VCU. They've got a couple of one lottery pick and maybe a first-round pick in the Cannon Catchings kid, who reportedly are making 7 figures. Alex is going to need that same financial support from the Crimson Collective. And I would imagine that every single question Alex had was answered the right way because he wouldn't have taken the job. As I continue to say, no matter who Mark Harlan was talking to, no matter who his targets were, I guarantee every single one of those targets asked Mark the same line of questions. What's the economic stability of my program right now? What is the financial infrastructure of not the athletic department, of what you have allocated for basketball? We know that this is a football school. We know what Coach Witt has done for Utah football. We know that, basically end of Ron McBride, of course, into Urban Meyer, and then obviously Pac-12 Coach Witt. This is now a community that latches onto the football program in a way that you just don't on the basketball program for now. And that's fine. I mean, ultimately, when it comes to the reality of collegiate athletics, if you had your druthers, you want your football program receiving the same amount of commitment, loyalty, and interest that Utah football receives, even coming off a down year. But you don't have to be one or the other. I mean, just look at the NCAA tournament. Some of the teams that are high seeds and really good. Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, I could keep going. There are several schools in the country that have robust football and basketball programs. And that should be the goal, and obviously is the goal, of Mark Harlan and his staff here, the athletic department, making sure that basketball receives the same level of commitment, loyalty, interest, and passion that the football program does. Now, it's going to be on Alex and his coaching staff and his players to provide the same type of consistent product and excitement competing for trophies the way the football program has, and not just a one-off. You got to do it consistently, the way Kyle did for a number of different years, and I have confidence he'll continue to starting next year. So we're live today. We're live today at the John M. Huntsman Center. Still fighting a little bit of what I was fighting last week, but feeling much, much better. And let me repeat, if last week was the first time you listened to this show, please give us another chance. I heard a couple of the interviews I did played back, and I sounded like I was dying. I wasn't dying. I just had a little throat thing. So apologies for the rough week last week, but we are off and running on a Monday afternoon, live today at the John M. Huntsman Center on the beautiful campus of the University of Utah. And we'll catch our first break of the day. Coming up on the other side, Josh Furlong, who covers the Utes for KSL, is our first guest. Happy Monday to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we are live today inside the historic John M. Huntsman Center for a historic day. Not to be redundant, Alex Jensen set to be introduced tonight about 6 o'clock Mountain Time as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. Our next guest covers the Utes for our friends over at KSL. My guy Josh Furlong on a Monday afternoon. Josh, happy Monday, buddy. How we doing?
Doing well, Spence. How are you?
I'm well. I appreciate the time. So we were talking about this to start the show, and it seems to me, and obviously want to get your take here, no matter where you are in the ecosystem of Utah athletics, if you are part of the department, if you played for Utah basketball, if you're a donor, if you're a season ticket holder, if you're a booster, if you're a student, if you're an alum, or if you cover the program like we do, I haven't heard any pushback on Mark Harlan's decision to bring in this Ute legend, Alex Jensen, who will be introduced tonight. Does it feel the same way to you, that this has just kind of been summarily and a consensus that this feels like the right move?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this feels like there's a lot of excitement being brought into the program. A lot of people are feeling rejuvenated. But it's funny, as you were saying that, you're mentioning, some of these students. The reality is these students weren't even born when Alex Jensen was playing, and that hurts my heart. But it's crazy that just how success can kind of carry forward, right? You can see from these days where it's just like, okay, the glory days of Utah basketball, whatever that may be. And I think anybody wants to kind of relive that. And so, if you're a student, you may not know who Alex Jensen is from a player, but you understand, why he would be important. And I think that gets you excited. And so even though as a student, you may not understand the full ramifications of what this could mean, there's a lot of opportunity to be able to say, okay, look, Utah's doing the right thing. Obviously we all know that, Alex Jensen, just because he's Alex Jensen doesn't mean that he's going to be a successful coach. I think obviously based on what we've seen as an assistant coach in the NBA and kind of the stories that we've heard from the different people that he's interacted with, that he can be a great coach. But at the end of the day, this is going to be one of those things that we have to kind of figure out and see as it develops. But I think everybody feels really excited about that. And at this point in kind of where we're at, that's what you need, right? You need the excitement. You need the money to flow into the program. You need those opportunities to come available because 4 years ago, people were excited about Craig Smith, but it wasn't to that same level. And so you've got to be able to have that money come in. You've got to be able to have that excitement come in and get people doing that. And that starts, honestly, tonight by having the people be involved with the introductory press conference.
So, of course, the next question, Josh, is where are we at in the process of Alex filling out his staff? And, it's funny you bring up the current Ute students not even being alive when Alex was playing here, and maybe the majority of them not even really knowing who he is. And I'm sure these same students don't remember the days where you had like 2 assistant coaches and maybe 1 trainer. Well, now there are like 8 assistant coaches, strength and conditioning, nutrition, and there are a lot of hires to make. This is not like grab Andre and 1 other coach and let's go. Like, this is going to be a staff that will take some time to fill out. Excuse me. And so I think the narrative that I've heard, at least, that it should all be Utes, all be former Utes or people that are with the program or whatever. I'm not fully on board with that, and I'll tell you why. Alex has been a professional coach, a coach in the pro ranks for about 20 years or so. And prior to that, he was at St. Louis with Rick, and I'm sure over the course of the past 2 decades, throughout his kind of sojourn in pro basketball, he has cultivated a tremendous amount of relationships that aren't just Andre Miller and Trace Caton and Britton Johnson or what have you. And, Kevin Young down in Provo, his assistant coaches, the majority of them are all ex-pro coaches, G League coaches, strength and conditioning coach from the NBA, nutritionist from the Phoenix Suns. I would like to see Alex mimic that approach. I don't give a rip what people say online. Everybody copies everybody when something works. But what's your take? And also, what are you hearing about the next steps in filling out this staff next to Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a process, right? And I think it'd be disingenuous to say, everybody that's on that staff should just be former Utes, right? Like, I don't think that's what Alex wants. I don't think that what the university needs. As you mentioned, the majority of his coaching tenure has been in the NBA, and so it's going to have obviously some NBA flavor to it, especially if he can get the guys that he wants, because that's what he's comfortable with. He hasn't coached in a collegiate realm for more than a decade, and so you're going to surround yourself around those things that work. And it's also a great model because a lot of these kids obviously want to be able to get here. They wanted to be developed by NBA-type talent and be able to move forward. And so I think it's a process that works, while at the same time recognizing, look, you can still have some of that with, let's say, like an Andre Miller, right? Obviously, he's the big name that everybody wants. And, it's no surprise that he's obviously interested in it and that Utah is very interested in him. My understanding is they want to get this press conference out of the way first, and then all that stuff can kind of fall into place, right? Whether he's, too far down in terms of
Josh Furlong is our guest. He covers the Utes for KSL. We're live today at the John M. Huntsman Center here on the beautiful campus of the University of Utah in preparation for tonight's announcement that Alex Jensen is the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. All right, Josh, before we get over to the women who are back in the NCAA tournament for the fourth time in 4 years, what should our Utah basketball fans know about the inaugural college basketball crown?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one because it's new, right? It's something that a lot of people want to call it a third-tier tournament, but at the same time, I think this is an opportunity for Utah just to continue to keep playing, allow themselves to kind of continue that season. Gabe Madsen had talked about wanting to have that closure, but at the end of the day, this is a tournament that is set up to be able to bring a lot of the power conference teams together and be able to kind of pit them together to continue the thing. There's been talk about this potentially having NIL ramifications in there where these players can make some money. And I think that's why you're seeing some of these teams wanting to be a participant in this. If you can get the players some money, get the university some money, and keep playing while still going, to Vegas or whatever that may be, this becomes a great opportunity. So, look, it's not going to be the NCAA tournament. It's not going to be some glamorous thing, but it could be a decent situation of mediocre teams that do well. So, not a bad situation, but, I can understand people wanting the season just to end.
So I would imagine, let's stay in the space for a minute, and I have your piece that you wrote for KSL up, and Coach Eilert made some comments. I'm 100% all in. I'm excited about it. I know players have to make decisions, but I think it would be special to have another opportunity to battle with these guys. So Coach Eilert, all in. He'll finish off his duties as the interim coach. Let me just ask you a follow-up, Josh, whether or not you've heard anything since you joined us last. You were the first person that brought up the potential of Alex Jensen keeping Coach Eilert around, and you made some good points about his history with the Big 12. Any up-to-date info about whether or not that's still a possibility?
Yeah, I think they're still trying to figure that out. I know, between him, David Evans, and Lo Leaf, there's a lot of opportunities there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Josh moves on, right? I could see him being able to kind of take another step forward and kind of do what he needs to do elsewhere. But I don't think he's out of the running by any means. I do think that there is some potential to be able to keep David Evans and Lo Leaf, especially for the recruiting advantages, AAU circuit, the Utah market, international markets. I think there's some advantages there. So it's still TBD, right? Like, I don't have any updated information on that in terms of more fixed details. But I do know that there is interest there. I think Lo Leaf has come on really strong lately and kind of showed what he can get from the AAU circuit and really bring in the recruiting front. And I think that's an attractive piece for Alex Jensen.
Jake Walleen has entered the transfer portal officially. If anyone else has, I've missed that announcement. Any idea if Jake's going to participate in this postseason tournament?
Yeah, that was his intent. This is an opportunity more for him to just get the leverage that he needs to in the, in this off season, where he can still consider Utah, but kind of see his value, see his market. But as part of this, he talked about wanting to be able to play in the postseason with this team. He wants to be able to be engaged. He wants to be there with them. I still think there's a huge interest in wanting to stay at Utah. I know there's, interest to have him back. But at the same time, he's just trying to fill it out and do it that way. So I wouldn't be surprised to still see him out there on the court for Utah. There's a lot of guys in a similar position where they're going to want to stay there and try to figure things out. But at the same time, the portal's open for Utah, but the whole NCAA transfer portal opens up next week, and you're going to start seeing guys that may want to start getting their names out there, may wanting to start kind of finding a new team if that's what they want to do. So, I wouldn't be surprised if a majority of the team enters their name in the portal. But as of right now, I haven't heard anything otherwise to say that this team isn't going to stay relatively intact for this tournament.
One more thing here, and you and I have talked about this, but let's just revisit it because here we are with Alex being introduced tonight. Ezra Asar, Keanu Dawes, guys like Mira Little, Mike Shravjamps, and the aforementioned Jake Wallin, the players on the roster, some of whom, namely Keanu Dawes, who had 3 double-doubles in the final 5 games after Josh took over for Craig. And Ezra Asar, I think, is a guy you'd be interested in. Any thoughts or insight as to which of these young men might come back to play for Alex?
Yeah, I think there's a good possibility for Keanu. I think he's liked his time here. He's liked the situation that he's in. Obviously, if NIL's right and Alex Jensen wants to keep him, I think that it's a good match made in heaven. It's obviously a player with a tremendous upside, and I think everything works to be able to keep him here. In terms of Ezra, I mean, that one's going to be a little bit tougher. He's obviously going to get a lot more offers. He's going to have people that want him. He's going to be an attractive name. Not that any of these guys won't be, but I think he's going to be the most marketable off of this current team. And quite honestly, he's got family. He's got 2 kids that live in the East Coast. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he, wants to get back there, wants to be able to be closer to home. But at the same time, I do know he likes Utah. I know that this is a place that he's found a connection with. Obviously, it's a place where he's built confidence and really become the player that he is today. So, I think Utah will spend some effort to be able to try to get him. But at the same time, I think they're going to be fighting an uphill battle with just so many other programs that are going to want him as well. So, Ezra's definitely a guy you're going to attract here and want, but he's going to be an attractive name elsewhere as well.
So moving over now to Gavin Peterson, who will join the show today in the Utah women's basketball program. They stumbled down the stretch, losing 3 of their final 5. And they barely beat BYU here in Salt Lake, but they did make it in. We knew that they would, but it is a tough ask. So the Lady Utes will be the number 8 seed, and they're going to take on Indiana. But should they beat Indiana, their prize for showing up is a second-round matchup against the host team, and that's Don Staley and the defending champ South Carolina. So tough one. Obviously, Coach Peterson already referenced they can only focus on Indiana. They can't look ahead. But what's your take on kind of how this went down, and what do you make of the Lady Utes' chances of doing something fun?
Yeah, this is probably one of the worst draws that they could have gotten. I think being able to get in that difficult 8-9 matchup is not ideal. And Utah hasn't, the last few games done well against teams that are probably even with it. And so I think, there's, especially with being able to play a team like Indiana that is very similar to what Utah does, like to shoot the 3-point ball, that becomes a very tall task, right? Just to be able to get out of the NCAA tournament first round. But then to know that you've got South Carolina on the other end where you have to do that on their home floor, I mean, that's an incredibly difficult task. Last year, they went into Spokane playing a Gonzaga team that hadn't lost in something like 3 years on their home court. They got lit up by their 3-point shooters and absolutely came away with a terrible loss. Those games are not easy to be able to play, and you're doing it against arguably one of the best teams in the country right now. And so, this is a tough task. I think this is one of those things where this Utah team can be good enough to be able to do it. They beat Notre Dame, who was ranked number 1 at one point this season. But at the same time, this team, for as good as they have been in their 3-point shooting and their efficiency and everything that way, they often let the other team dictate the tone of the game. And if the other team is going to be aggressive and kind of take control, Utah sometimes backs down and doesn't kind of fight back. For this team to be able to go a long ways, they have to fight back. They have to be the aggressors. They have to play like they've got nothing to lose, and really they don't, because this is a difficult path. And so if you can get out of that first round, if you can find a way to beat Indiana, you've got to go into that South Carolina game just willing to do whatever it takes to be able to win. You obviously played South Carolina last year. You know what kind of team they are. You've at least had some scouting on them, but this is a different team. Both teams are. I'm curious to see what they can do, but they have to play like a team that's, not ready to lose and just really fight. So really curious to see what they do. But yeah, this is about as difficult as it could be for the Utes.
It's kind of circle back around to where we started before I set you loose. By the way, the Lady Utes will be playing coming up on the 21st at 11:30 a.m. And you can see it on ESPN2, and of course you can hear it on this radio station. So stay tuned for that. All right, you and I have discussed this before, and I talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. And I don't fully know all the answers to what I'm about to unpack for you, but I would imagine that just Alex taking this job is a good sign for a few different things, and namely the health of the economic situation regarding the athletic department. And obviously, specifically, whatever Mark Harlan told him they had allocated for the future of basketball. I mean, Alex did not need this job. He didn't need to take this job. In fact, I was told on a couple of different occasions that Dallas very much wanted him back, and they like him, and they didn't want him to leave, and actually made it a little bit more difficult for him to jump than after the initial offer, because they did counter with the ability to get him back and make sure he was taken care of. So just the fact that, Josh, he said yes, and the first choice for Mark Harlan is the choice that it ultimately became the reality of who the coach is, has to indicate that the questions that we all continue to have about what the state of the collective is must be healthier than some people consider. I want to be clear. I don't fully know. I mean, this continues to be such a difficult space to traverse that there's a website that pops up that talks about NIL. You check it out, and it's not really vetted. There's a report here or there from a paper, and you're like, what exactly does that mean? And, it's easy to look 45 miles down south and see the reports that they're paying AJ DeBantis $7 million for 5 months of basketball, or Yegor Demin and Cannon catching 7 figures reportedly. But I guess the way I'll ask it, because I've talked to you about whether or not you have inside information or knowledge about what the numbers are and what the data says, but what does Alex taking the job, I guess, say to you about the current health of the finances? Because without that, you're dead. You've got to have it, and you know that as well as anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things where Alex isn't coming into this job just hoping that things are going to be good, right? I think this is a situation where obviously he was their number one target, and it's not like this is just something that fell into everybody's lap and it was like, oh, cool, we got Alex. He was out of a job and we're just pulling him in. This was a very difficult process for both sides to be able to get it. But with that being said, there were things that needed to be done, or signs needed to be made to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. You could argue some of the situations that they had last week, where they were bringing out their college or campus magic plan that they were putting out there for the university. Part of that goes into that, right? You're showing this commitment to the university as a whole that things are going to be better. It's not just, Alex. Yeah, Alex is a big figure in that, and you're going to be a big part of that. But it's this whole emphasis to say, look, we're trying to make this investment into athletics and everything else to be able to make this a better system. And so that can become an attractive situation for Alex to be able to say, look, they're making the steps necessary. Clearly, there were more steps that needed to be made, whether that be donor assurances or different things to be able to say, hey, to compete at this level, we need X amount of dollars. There was an article last week that said to have a top 25 team, you needed about $6 million, right? That's one of those things where if Utah can get to that range, they had about $2 million in NIL last year. If you can get about $6 million, that shows at least a commitment. That number is always going to continue to go up. It's never going to go down. But at least if you can make those assurances to say, hey, here's what we're doing, this is what we're going to be able to help you with, to me, that kind of eases Alex's mind a little bit to say, look, I don't have to go from the NBA. I can come now because I feel confident about what they're doing. So I'm curious to see if we'll hear any about that tonight, from Mark Harlan, Taylor Randall, those kinds of things. I would assume that they don't get too into the weeds with that, but I would be fascinated to know, because if not, as I've said to you before, we're going to be in the same situation in 3-4 years again. It doesn't matter who the coach is. If Utah isn't going to invest in that program, it's going to be a similar situation. You can only do so much with so little. So really curious to see what it is, but I do think it's just a good sign of things to come that they've been able to invest in it, and that it's attracted Alex enough that he wants to be here.
Expectations are the cause of all problems in sports and in life. Write that down, kids. So, Josh, let's set reasonable expectations. Year one, Alex Jensen. And it's impossible to know because we don't even know who's playing for him and won't know for a number of months. But, the Big 12 this year was probably the third best conference in college basketball, if we're honest. I think a lot of people anticipated that it would be battling with the SEC for number one, and maybe it's number two. But ultimately, it is going to be a bear every year. If it's not one, it's probably going to be two. It'll never be below 3, with blue bloods left and right. What's a reasonable thing to say about what we all should expect next year during Alex's first season on the sidelines?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, I think, in basketball, because I think the natural point for everybody is that, they have to get to the NCAA tournament. And while I don't think that that's not possible, I think there's a challenge there of being able to make that the only metric, right? To me, Utah finishes the season about 10th, 11th. They're kind of mid to lower mid situation. If you can get maybe into that second round bye, if you can get into the top 6, top 4 of the Big 12 next year, I think that would definitely show progress. And that still means you're probably in the NCAA tournament and you're this top team. But I think this team is closer than many people expect. They just didn't have a lot of the players that could get them kind of over that edge, that hump, so to speak. And so for me, whether you get into the NCAA tournament or not, I don't know that that's fully what matters, but I think you need to be able to be competitive enough to be able to be at least on the bubble, right? Or at least be in that conversation to say, hey, this is a team that is on the rise. We can see them moving. Maybe you're the St. John's, right? Where St. John's is slowly building with Rick Pitino, and now they're this number 2 seed that's a dominant force in the tournament. Is he Rick Pitino? Probably not. But I think, you've got to be able to build those expectations where if you can look back on it and you can say, this is a team that is clearly progressing. They're not necessarily taking step backs after they win big games. Then I think it's shows progress. Is that an exact figure of, they have to hit this many wins? I don't know. Obviously, 20 wins would be a great opportunity, but I don't know that there's any set metrics here. I think it's more of just kind of a general vibe of how this team is going, because the realistic expectation is, they probably won't get the NCAA tournament next year. But if you can at least make that case where you're at least challenging for it late in the season, I think you'll at least get some support from fans and be able to say, okay, we believe that this is the direction that he's going, and we believe that we can get there.
All right, Josh, final thing. I am sitting in the John M. Huntsman Center, which is a beautiful building rich in history. I went out to the water fountain to get some water, and it looked like a cow urinated in my Nalgene bottle. 55 years old, okay? So, let's be honest. We all love the Huntsman Center, a number of different awesome memories. Every time I walk in here, I'm overwhelmed with memories on a number of different levels, but there are still steps that need to be taken. But what is the Josh Furlong take on a potential, renovation to this historic building? What do you think it means for the community?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to lose, buildings of history, right? I mean, obviously you can point to the Larry Bird, Magic game. I think that one's a big one. There was NCAA championships won there in gymnastics. There's phenomenal games that have been played in there just in the recent, history of basketball and such. And so I think it's tough to be able to lose a venue like that. But the reality is it's a venue that is aging. It doesn't fit the needs of what Utah wants, and the fact that you need to be able to do more with it kind of shows where they're at, right? They don't have a lot of room to work with to be able to make it a better venue. And so you've kind of got to start from scratch, so to speak, find a situation that works for everybody. So what that means, remains to be seen. At the end of the day, I think it means, fans need to show up and they need to support it, just to be able to show that this, the university can do what they can to support, the athletics that are going to be inside that building. So I'm curious to see what happens. Really think that this could be a great opportunity for Utah, but it is unfortunate to see something like that go.
Josh, you are the man. Appreciate the time. Have a great week, and we'll get you on soon.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Josh Furlong covers the Utes for KSL. You can get him on social media to follow all of his work. If you're a Ute fan, he's a must-follow at JFurKSL. That's where you find him. Brought to you today by our friends at IFA Country Stores. Spring is here, and like any good coach, it's time to put together a game plan for a healthy yard. IFA's 4+ lawn care program is locally blended and formulated for Utah soils. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move. Consult IFA's team of experts at one of 18 Utah locations or online at ifa.coop. IFA.coop? That can't be right. I don't know. IFA somewhere, unless the .com is now .coop. Maybe I missed it. Well, check it out. Type in IFA.coop and see what happens. It's what my read says, so leave me alone. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Roxy Bernstein called a grip of games for the Big 12 tournament. Roxy Bernstein has called a grip of games here at the Huntsman Center, and he's our guest to start off the 3 o'clock hour. We'll go from there on a Monday afternoon right here on ESPN 700. Checketts, then me and Larry David are in good company. All right, our next guest. That's kind of the theme song at this point, and you know why by now. Roxy Bernstein, my friend. Happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Spence, you got to play that instead of the Crows. I mean,
okay. You know what?
Just saying.
No, it's fair. It's fair. Maybe we just need to retire the Rembrandts because you do have a beef with Courtney Cox, which makes you one of the most fascinating broadcasters I've ever interviewed, and simply just play the music of one of your best friends. I can allow that moving forward if that's your call, Roxy.
I can adjust.
Okay.
I can get over it while I'm talking to you. How's that?
I love it. I love it. All right, my friend. I am sitting here live in the John M. Huntsman Center as we prepare for tonight's introductory press conference where Alex Jensen will be introduced as the 17th head coach in the history of the Utah men's basketball program. So before I get to some specific questions, Roxy, I just wonder what you personally make of this hire.
I like the hire a lot. And, look, I didn't necessarily agree with the parting of the ways with Craig Smith, but I understand Mark Harlan's got tough decisions to make, and that's why he's in that position, and I'm just offering my 30,000-foot view of the situation because I do think Craig is a terrific coach. And look, obviously Mark knows more about the situation than I do in feeling it wasn't working out with Craig, and so they turned the page. And I do hear great things about Alex Jensen. I don't know him personally. Familiar with his work, obviously, longtime assistant in the NBA. I remember when he played there at the University of Utah. And as King McClure gave me a little grief on the air when we were doing the Utah game on ESPN at the Big 12 tournament, I did flex a little bit, and I texted Jason Kidd, who he worked with in Dallas, who I went to college with, as you know. And I just asked him about Alex Jensen, and he was very complimentary of Alex and what he's going to bring. He did not want to lose him, but he understands it's a great opportunity for Alex Jensen to go back to his alma mater and take over the program. But the other thing that Jason made sure to point out to me was he's always prepared. He's always on top of it, knows his stuff, on top of being a great human being. So by all accounts, this is a home run hire for Utah.
I wonder, Roxy, from your vantage point, because I referenced this earlier when I was teasing you as a guest, you've called a lot of games in this building. You've called a lot of Ute games over the years, both in the PAC and now, by the way, that workload during the Big 12 tournament, nice work, but we'll get there in a moment. You've called a lot of Ute games over the years. What do you make of the dormant energy, for the most part, the Utah basketball has had to make its way through? And look, there have been moments in time. I always want to be fair when I bring this up. I mean, you can go back to Giacoletti with Bogut. You can talk Boylan, NCAA tournament 5 seed. You can talk Larry Kraskowiak, DeLon Wright, and Kyle Kuzma. And even Craig had some good wins. And it hasn't been entirely flatlined, but I was a student here in the 90s, and it has not been like that for a long time. So curious to get your take as a guy that called games over the years in this building and elsewhere for Utah basketball, and what you think it will take from Alex and this new iteration of the staff to get this thing ticking like it was when he was a player here.
Well, first off, you got to also take into account, Spence, as you know, the level of competition has stepped up.
Mm-hmm.
To go from the Mountain West now to the Pac-12 and now to the Big 12, which many people think has been the best basketball conference in college basketball the last 10 years, with the success that schools have had and the commitment that schools have made. And that's the big thing for me, is the commitment. And I don't know the particulars of the NIL and the resources that's available for Alex Jensen and what the University of Utah has committed to basketball. But that now is what you need to be successful. Now, you have to spend wisely and with what you have, because some schools have not spent wisely. When you look at, for example, Kansas State and how much money they put out this year and how that didn't work for them, and how much money, look, if you want to compete with Duke, well, you got to have an excess of $20 million. And I don't think that's going to happen. But you look at what's going on down the road, for example, at BYU and the commitment they've made financially, because they clearly invested in bringing in guys like Yegor Demon, and next year with DeBansa coming in and the money they've committed to that. that's unfortunately the name of the game in college basketball right now. You're not just selling tradition. You're not just selling an education. You're not just selling playing for a particular coach. There is the money question, which always seems to be, I'm not going to say always, Spence, but the majority of times when a kid is considering university, the first question these days is, well, what am I getting? How much am I going to get? And unfortunately, that's kind of the way the landscape has gone. And with the University of Utah, I think they have to examine how committed they're going to be in terms of the resources. If they're going to want to push and near the top of the Big 12, well, they're going to have to commit the resources to do it because that's the name of the game right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, and I wanted to follow up with this because ultimately, unless you have access to the Utah Athletic Department financials in your DocuSign, I'm not going to ask you for specifics, but I will ask you just kind of generally speaking, what sort of questions you think Alex Jensen taking this job answers. Because, look, like you said about Jason Kidd, I have contacts in Dallas, and I've known Alex for years. He was Quinn Snyder's number one assistant during the Gobert and Mitchell years, and I was in school when Alex was a player, and I know his wife. Like, he was valued in Dallas. He did not have to take this job. They wanted him to come back. And, Roxy, whether it's Alex Jensen or you resurrect Rick Majerus, the candidates were all going to ask Mark Harlan the same thing, which is, what is the status of the finances of this program? What's the financial ecosystem infrastructure of basketball? Before I take this job, I need those questions answered. And I don't know what the specifics of the answers entail. But, Roxy, just because he took the job, that has to indicate that this program is receiving some financial support and promises from the athletic department that maybe people don't fully understand. Does that make sense?
That's a very valid way to look at it. Yes, I agree. Because Alex Jensen's not going to leave a situation, even though it's his alma mater and his love for the University of Utah, if there isn't a commitment. And they have to be more committed than I think they've been. Because if you're stepping into a league now where you look around and you know Kansas isn't cutting corners. And I'm not expecting the University of Utah to be Kansas year in, year out, one of the blue blood programs in college basketball. But if you're going to compete with them, Iowa State has a lot of resources that I know about that TJ Otzelberger has at his disposal. I guarantee you Baylor has put forth a lot of revenue into not just, VJ Edgecombe this year and the talent that they have, but they have a sparkling new arena, which is fabulous, and a practice facility. So the commitment is there from the other schools. And if you're going to be on par with that, you're going to have to be connected to your donor base, to your fan base, and know that there is, from the top down, the urge to win within the department. And I guarantee you that Alex Jensen got those answers that he wanted from Mark Harlan and the brain trust of the University of Utah, or he was not going to take this job.
Really was not anticipating this becoming a potential, but it's interesting to consider Josh Eilert as an option for Alex as an assistant coach. So as you know, Roxy, after Craig was dismissed, Coach Eilert was elevated as the interim. And look, it was the same thing when they fired Coach Ludd and Mike Bajakian took over as the play caller, and Mike addressed the media and he's like, hey, it's Andy's system. There's really nothing I can do. And we're like, yeah, so I wasn't expecting Josh Eilert to coach this team to a Big 12 championship or what have you. But Josh played in the Big 12. He coached at West Virginia and knows the Big 12. What do you make of the potential of Alex looking at Josh Eilert as one of his assistants? Because he moved his family here, and I'm sorry to continue to bring this up. I just think we do such a poor job of acknowledging the human element of situations like this.
And I talked to Josh about it at the Big 12 tournament last Monday, that we were sitting there in preparation for the Utah game in the Big 12 tournament against UCF on Tuesday, about what he's been dealing with. And it's not easy. As you alluded to, he moved to Salt Lake City last summer. And he had experience in this role, having been the interim head coach at West Virginia when Bob Huggins was let go. Yep. And he'd spent a lot of time in West Virginia working for Huggins and played at Kansas State, as you alluded to. So he's got the ties to the conference. I think it would be a strong move because Alex Jensen needs somebody that's well-versed in the college game, and especially in the Big 12, the league he's going to be coaching in. And Josh Eilert would be a great starting point. Doesn't always work out that way, but coaches usually want their own guys, and I'm sure Alex has so many contacts and possibilities for people to be on his staff. But I guarantee he'll give consideration to Josh Eilert and some of the other coaches on the staff. And usually you see one guy as a holdover, and it makes sense that Eilert would be the guy, but you never know. But Josh gave up a lot to come to Salt Lake City, and he and Craig Smith went back a long way, even though they never worked together before, but they had a relationship. And that's partly what brought Josh Eilert out to the University of Utah. And I think he's done a good job. And it can't be easy, right? You step in a situation, and he told me he was stunned, shocked when Mark Harlan pulled him into his office and told him that the coaching change was going to be made after the loss down in Orlando. And then he had to keep that locker room together. He could easily fracture and split, especially when you look at Craig's son is on the team in Brady. One of his other sons is the director of operations. And that makes it, I think, even more challenging. But credit to those kids, credit to the Smith family. They came to work. They showed up. I thought Tommy Lloyd, his impassioned post-game news press conference down in Tucson, the game after, where Eilert took over, was incredible to watch, and the emotion, it was genuine, and the respect he had for Craig. And he said, I asked Tommy about it also. Tommy said, "Look, I'm friendly with Craig. I wouldn't call him that we're not close, but we're friendly. But it's a fraternity." And for Josh Eilert now, he is hoping to, I think, if not catch on with Utah and stay there, but get back into the fraternity somehow, because he's a very accomplished coach.
More question about our basketball team that plays its basketball here in the Huntsman Center. Then we got a team about 40 miles south that we got to talk about. But, you know, Roxy, I know you don't watch every Utah game, but you called some and you saw a lot and you pay attention. So I'm just going to run down this list. Ezra Sarr, who had some really bright moments, including a career night against Brigham Young in this building earlier this year. Keanu Dawes, who Coach Eilert played more than Craig did and had 3 double-doubles in his final 5 games, including a monster game, round 1 of the Big 12 tournament. And then there's Mira Little. There's also Mike Shrevjamps, and then Jake Wallin, who did announce that he is officially in the transfer portal. If you're Alex Jensen, those players catching your eye, you want to see what you can do to get some of that talent back in the fold next year?
No question. Ezra Sarr, I thought, showed a lot this year with his physicality, his toughness, he's got that old man game, Spence, where, look, he's not going to dazzle you with his athleticism and his soaring dunks, even though he can dunk, but he does so much work below the rim and with his feet and his smarts. He is a fun player to watch, and he's kind of a throwback guy. And you pair him with Keanu Dawes, who really emerged, and you got to see what he could do. He had that double-double in career performance, even though it came in a loss against UCF in Kansas City. Jake Wallin is an interesting guy to me because I think he's got a future. And maybe I'm in the minority, but I've talked to some NBA people. There's something there with Jake Wallin. And there is, even though he played sparingly last year, started to come on this year a little bit, he has a bright future. And that's another key piece. If you're Alex Jensen, you need some foundational pieces to build around. Those 3 guys would give you a really good start. And Shrevjamps is such an interesting matchup because of his size. The only criticism I have is I wish Shrevjamps shot it better. It's been inconsistent, but he does a lot of really good things in a tough matchup. That's where I think it needs to start for Alex Jensen, is re-recruiting your own locker room and keeping some of those guys there, because those could be good pieces to build around as you move forward and take over this program.
One more. I actually have one more youth thing, then we'll get over to the BYU side, because I am wondering, Roxy, from your vantage point as a vet in this business, what you would say to the fan base about a reasonable expectation. Expectations are the main cause of misery in life and in sports. I'm just dropping life knowledge here on a show on a Monday, Roxy. But, you know, ultimately, as you outlined, the Big 12, it wasn't the best conference this year. That was the SEC. But if it wasn't 3, it was 2. And next year it could be 1. And year after year, it's going to be top 2 or 3. I don't know what's reasonable to expect. It's impossible to know what to expect until we know who these young men are going to play for them. But generally speaking, year 1, Alex Jensen, Utah basketball? What's a reasonable level of expectation for the fan base?
I think you're just looking to see progress, right? That because year one, he's going to come in and put his foundation in place, and you want to see that grow in year one. I'm not expecting Utah to be a tournament team right away. Now, as we know in this day and age, with the transfer portal and getting guys on campus, that it can happen quickly, and it makes it challenging, as you alluded to. You're in the Big 12, but year one needs to be progress. The team gets better. That the foundation for the future is going to get laid. And with what Alex Jensen wants to implement and how he's going to run the program, that's the thing. Does he play an exciting style of basketball? Is there a connection to the fan base? Those are the key things that I think fans want to see, that he is committed, that there is that likability factor, but also you can identify with him, and there's that connection, that outreach from the program to the fan/donor base.
All right, let's move over now because we have a couple of teams playing some fun postseason basketball. All due respect to the college basketball crown, where Utah will be. So BYU runs off 9 of their final 10. They ran into a Houston team, and Roxy, I'll just say this, man, every time I've watched Houston play this year, I have just felt fundamentally horrible for the other team. Utah went into their gym, and at one point I think had 3 buckets and 8 turnovers. Brigham Young went down there and got undressed earlier. So, look, obviously Houston is another level. And does BYU have that level with that strength, that athleticism? I have questions there. But they get in as a 6 seed taking on VCU. They were a 6 seed last year. They played the A-10 champs last year in Duquesne and lost. Ryan Odom, our old buddy from Utah State, has a veteran squad with great guard play. And BYU is only a 3.5-point favorite. They have not won a tournament game since 2012. They have not advanced to the round of 32 since a guy named Fredette was shooting jumpers in Provo. But there's a lot to like about what Kevin's done. There's a lot to like about this depth. There's a lot to like about the way they played to end the year. So what do you make of where we find ourselves in the matchup that BYU receives as a result of their season?
It seems trendy to pick VCU, and when people are looking for upsets in their bracket. The factor that nobody's really talking about is playing in Denver, playing in the altitude. That is a significant advantage, I think, for BYU. When VCU probably hasn't experienced it, certainly Ryan Odom has, having spent time up the road, but his players haven't. And that is, I think, a big on the second half. And at some point, look, you've seen it over the years, whether it's in Salt Lake City or in Provo. Teams seem to hit a wall. Can they push through? And that's a big question. And I give a big advantage to BYU because of where the game is being played. But this is a BYU team that has improved as the season has gone on. They've gotten better as they've understood Kevin Young's system and their spacing offensively and their cutting and their movement. As you allude to the depth that they have, they're too deep at every position. And they'll play 11 guys. I like this matchup for BYU for those reasons. You allude to the experienced guard play that VCU has, and they shoot the three well, but so does BYU. And BYU, I think this is a good matchup for them. I thought last year's was too, to be honest with you. It didn't work out that way, but for a few reasons, I like BYU in this one.
7 Big 12 teams make the tournament. I think the Vegas preseason line was 9.5. Would you characterize this as a down year for the Big 12 top to bottom? I mean, look, there's some elite teams I want to talk about, but 7 teams get in. Is that a down year for the Big 12?
For the way it's gone recently, yes. And also the infusion of the 4 new teams, especially a team like Arizona coming in, which has had so much success. That I thought there'd be more. And frankly, West Virginia got the short end of the stick. West Virginia should have been in, especially over North Carolina. But that's a whole nother conversation and why that took place. But so it should have been 8. There's 7. I do think that Houston has a real good chance to get to the Final Four. I wouldn't rule out Arizona. I think the East bracket is pretty wide open. And I like the way Arizona was playing down the stretch. And, look, Tommy Lloyd's teams haven't lived up to the hype. in terms of the postseason, and Sean Miller never got to a Final Four as well when he was at Arizona. But I think the Wildcats have a chance to get through because of the draw and because of the way they're playing right now. And you could all of a sudden change it, right? The narrative, if 7 is a down year for the Big 12 this year, but they get 2 teams to San Antonio in the Final Four, I think that changes. But at this point right now, you'd have to consider it a little bit of a down year because of the success that the league has had recently.
So you reference Arizona. I will follow up, though, just about Houston. And, Kelvin Sampson had a good team last year. They lost the Jamal Shed kid prior to the tournament. And you got to have health this time of year. And we'll see what happens with Cooper Flagg. I don't know why they play him on Friday. I think they sit him and let him play Sunday after they just beat up on the winner of the 16 play-in game. But if Houston is able to remain healthy, it's like I said, man, I've watched Houston games this year and have honestly felt bad for the team they're playing against. They're that level of physical. They're that level of tough. They can guard. I think they're getting Juwan Roberts back because they sat in the final couple of games of the Big 12 tournament. But what has to fall in place for Houston to go win the thing, which I think they can?
Well, health, because that was what derailed them last year.
Yeah.
If Shed doesn't get hurt last year, to me, I think they have a real chance to win it. Now, it would have been tough because of how good UConn was, but I do believe that changed the complete dynamic because he was the quote-unquote head of the snake, right? That's what Shed was for Kelvin Sampson last year, and that's what Milos Uzan is this year coming in from Oklahoma. So to get Roberts back, the one thing that I look at this Houston team a little bit differently than last year, as good as they are defensively, I think they were better last year. This is a better offensive team, Spence, than it was last year. Look at their three-point shooting numbers. Houston shoots the three at about 40%, and that cannot get overlooked. With guys like Emmanuel Sharp and with L.J. Cryer, they can really shoot the ball. And that changes, I think, the way you have to look at this Houston team. And Kelvin Sampson's been close, right? He's had great teams. Is this the team that breaks through? It could be. The culture that they have and the buy-in factor, that everybody accepts the role. And when you sign up to play for Kelvin Sampson, you know what you're in store for. I was there early in the season when they played Butler, and it was a Saturday afternoon game in early December, and they were 4-3. They had 3 losses, 2 in overtime, and the other one was to Auburn, right? They lost to San Diego State, and they lost to Alabama, and they lost to the number 1 team in the country. And 4-3, people were kind of forgetting about them, and they were fine with that. And then all of a sudden, they ripped off, 19 of the next 20 games, and the only loss the rest of the way was an overtime game at home to Texas Tech, who finished as the 2 seed in the Big 12. This is a real tough team to play against in so many ways. And I think, to me, in my bracket, I've got them going to the national championship game. I don't have them winning it, even though I think they very well could. But this is a terrific Houston team that is a real difficult opponent to play against.
I'll ask you about 2 more teams in one question. Both are on the 3 line. And, the first game I watched this year of Iowa State's was against Auburn when they nearly beat him. They lost that game, but that was the only game they lost in their first, I think, 16 games. And during that 16-game stretch, they had a win over Kansas, who was top 10 at the time, Marquette, who was top 5 at the time, and Baylor, who was the top 25 team. And I was at the game when they rolled into Salt Lake, and they just dump-trucked Utah. This feels like a team that their good is really good, but we haven't seen their good in a long time. I just said good 4 times in one question. So give me your thoughts on the ceiling of Iowa State. And then Texas Tech is also on the 3 line. So what do you think is best case for those 2 teams?
Well, the concerning thing for both teams, Spence, is health. Because Keyshawn Gilbert is hurt. He's not going to play this weekend for Iowa State. You look at Texas Tech, Darian Williams and Chance McMillan didn't finish the Big 12 tournaments. So that has to be a concern for both T.J. Otzelberger and Grant McCaslin going into the tournament. I do believe that McMillan and Darian Williams will be good to go, is everything I hear from Texas Tech. And they're a threat. Now, I think they have the tough bracket being in the West, but this has the makeup of a team that can get to the Final Four because of how this team plays together. They have the player of the year in the Big 12 and JT Toppin. They have good guard play. Christian Anderson, the freshman, has a chance to be an NBA player. This is a well-coached, defined team in terms of knowing their roles. And then you look at Iowa State, they're tough to match up against because most of their parts are interchangeable. But if you take Keyshawn Gilbert out, I have some reservations about how far they can go. And I have concerns, can Iowa State get out of the first weekend without Gilbert? Because he does so much for that team, and it changes the roles. All of a sudden, Curtis Jones, who is their best scorer, but he excels in coming off the bench, now has to start. Everybody has to kind of shift in terms of their roles for Iowa State, and it depletes the bench production and the strength that they have. So I have concerns. I have more concerns about Iowa State than I do about Texas Tech at this point.
Roxy, one more question, then I'll set you loose, and it's a bit of a non sequitur because I want to ask you real quick. We are Hockeytown, USA, with a rich history of about 10 months of pro hockey.
Detroit,
Indeed. I mean, look, they've got their argument. I get it. Okay, I understand it. But ultimately, it's moved out west to the Rocky Mountains. And, Roxy, here we are 2 points back now of both the Canucks and the Blues, who have come on as of late, and on even numbers as far as games played, with both Vancouver. Actually, St. Louis has one more game, so we're still in the mix. It's going to be tough. I mean, you look at 2 points with 16, 17 games left, and you think, yeah, you can overcome that. But, you know, you got to win in regulation. You got to win at home. You got to do some things that the Utah Hockey Club has struggled as a young group. But what do you make of where we find ourselves, and is there still a good chance that we could see playoff hockey in Hockeytown, USA here in Salt Lake?
There's a chance, sure. Because right now, the last time we talked, they were about, 6 points out. They're just 2 points back. But there's a logjam of teams, right? That you have the Canucks, you have the Blues, who are starting to get, I think, playing some really good hockey. St. Louis has won a couple in a row in 7 of their last 10. Calgary's an interesting team to me in this race because the Flames have 2 games in hand on Utah and Vancouver and 3 on St. Louis. But they have not been playing well recently, and that has to be a concern. But you need to capitalize on the schedule, and I think you have to look at it if you're Andre Tourné and the Utah Hockey Club right now, that every game you have to enter with the mentality as a playoff game, that you can't just throw 2 points away. And it's a challenging run through the next month. It starts in Edmonton tomorrow night, but then you get home for some games that are winnable. And then a tough road trip where you're going to Tampa, Florida. You do have a game in Calgary, or at home against Calgary, I should say. But there's some tough games on the schedule. And to end the season with Dallas, Nashville, St. Louis, that's why you can't afford to slip up and burp points away. That when you have the ability to get 2 points, you got to get them. And when you have those games against the teams you're fighting with, whether it's Calgary, whether it's St. Louis, you can't let those become 3-point games. You have to win those in regulation.
Roxy, you are the man. Always appreciate the time. Thanks. What's your next assignment? What do you got coming up on tap?
I may have some NIT this weekend. I'm waiting to find out. If not, I am actually headed to Fargo next week for NCAA hockey en route to the Frozen Four. As the NCAA hockey regionals, I'll be in Fargo, North Dakota.
There you go. Never a dull moment. One of the hardest working men in the business. Thank you, my friend. Be well, okay?
You got it, Spence. Anytime, bud.
Roxy Bernstein, our buddy from the Pac-12 Network back in the day, had a yeoman's workload for the Big 12 championship. Does college hockey, as you heard. He's a busy guy, and I always appreciate his time. You can find him on social media, which is just his name, at Roxy Bernstein, is where you find him. All right, we are live today at the John M. Huntsman Center on the historic campus of the University of Utah, a building that's going to get a bit of a facelift coming up in a little bit. We are preparing for the introductory press conference of Alex Jensen. He's going to be introduced as the 17th head coach in the history of Utah men's basketball. The panel, the dais, the table, everything's set up, looking good. Bill's going to MC it, and 2 chairs next to Bill. My guess is that's Mark Harlan And probably Alex Jensen, since he's being introduced as the head coach tonight. That's my guess. Roxy stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience and nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every deal. It's a one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires, starting at just $69. Stop by a Burt Brothers or Tire Busters location today, or schedule an appointment online to experience the trusted service that has made Burt Brothers a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. By the way, shout out to IFA Country Stores. IFA.coop is a real thing. I'm old. To me, it's .com or .org. Sorry. So go over to IFA.coop and you will find their website, because apparently they changed the internet when I was sleeping. All right, we will catch a quick break. Coming up on the other side, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on the bracket, focus on Utah State, UCLA, BYU, VCU. Also, Deion Sanders with a new idea for spring football. I think it's something worth talking about, because a lot of these games are going to be going away. We are going to be joined by Gavin Peterson live on site in about 25 minutes from right now, the head coach of the Utah women's basketball program. Back in the NCAA tournament, 4th time in 4 years. They're taking on Indiana. If they beat Indiana, they take on South Carolina, Don Staley's powerhouse team that won the national championship a year ago. And then we got a couple of things in the works for the second half of the show. We'll let you know as things unfold. It is The Drive on a Monday afternoon. It's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700.
Utah program. It's going to be fun to watch him build it. You see the college game has changed a lot. I don't pretend to be an expert on that at all, but all the narratives around college basketball and how the teams are built has changed a ton. But I think that Alex is a really, has a really creative mindset when it comes to how to run a team. He's incredibly smart. He's able to be flexible when things are thrown his way. So I have no doubt that he'll have success at Utah. It'll be fun to watch him.
All right, we're live today from the John M. Huntsman Center, preparing for tonight's introductory press conference for Alex Jensen. Introduced as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. The press conference will get rolling at about 6 o'clock tonight. Bill Riley will be the MC. I'm not sure which other Ute legends will be in attendance, but the buzz around town certainly is palpable. I think a lot of former Utes will be here. Certainly Alex, his wife Natalie, and their family here at the Huntsman Center, so stay tuned for that coming your way at about 6 o'clock tonight. And that was Will Hardy, who spoke about Alex Jensen recently during a Jazz post-game press conference when asked the question of the hire. Alex worked for Will for 1 year, and it's interesting to hear Will talk about Alex in those type of terms because Alex wanted to stay, and Will was not interested in that beyond 1 year of Alex's contract. Alex spent 9 years as the lead assistant for Quinn Snyder during a very successful period of Utah Jazz basketball where Alex, in large part, was credited with the development of Rudy Gobert, who was a gangly, awkward rookie who could barely run up and down the floor and turned into a three-time All-Star, four-time Defensive Player of the Year, and is a Hall of Fame player. Rudy Gobert is going to be in the Hall of Fame. And the bulk of that credit certainly goes to Gobert, but Alex was the coach that worked alongside him quite a bit. So Alex making a name for himself in pro basketball as a player development coach. He was the G League Coach of the Year once upon a time, a league that is really tough to coach in because nobody in the G League wants to be in the G League. Players want to be in the NBA. Coaches want to be in the NBA. Executives, broadcasters, you name it. PR folk, they don't want to be in the G League. And Alex was able to coach a team to a G League championship and now spent a number of years in the pros honing his skills, and now he takes over as the Utah men's basketball coach. So Utah basketball season tickets on sale. They've got the QR code here in the Huntsman Center, as they should. So that announcement will come your way at about 6 o'clock tonight. We're going to bring in Gavin Peterson today, live on site. Gavin is the head coach of the Utah women's basketball program. And for the fourth straight year, the Utah women find themselves in the NCAA tournament with a first-round matchup against Indiana. The Utes are an 8th seed. They're playing in the region where South Carolina will host. A little bit different on the women's side of things, where you are able to host a region if you're one of the higher seeds. South Carolina under Don Staley obviously won the national championship a year ago. So should Utah beat Indiana, they're going to run into a buzzsaw. So we'll see what the Utah women's basketball program can do. But a couple of other tournament thoughts here. So BYU wins 9 of their last 10 basketball games. They certainly learned what the next level of basketball looks like. Since you and I last spoke, we saw BYU take on Houston in the Big 12 championship semifinal, and that game was over before you could make a sandwich. It was 15-0, and quite frankly, BYU never even counterpunched. There were a few small runs here or there, but outside of Keba Keita, former Ute, who had a double-double, 14 points, 12 rebounds, and a few moments here or there from Dawson Baker, that was a team that looked terrified to play against the physicality, the pressure, the speed, the defensive prowess of the Houston Cougars under Kelvin Sampson. And, Yegor Demon, for all of his talent, and there's a lot to like about Yegor. You can see why pro scouts really like him. He is 6'9", and all of it. He's a great passer. He's a skilled ball handler and a really good playmaker. Doesn't shoot it well from the outside, but he just cowers away from any sort of pressure. And BYU is going to see that against VCU. VCU is a good defensive basketball team. They're one of the top 25 defensive basketball teams in the country. They actually lead the country in effective field goal percentage defense. They're second against twos. And they've got 3 players in their rotation, 6'10 or taller, and they're one of the top teams in the country in offensive rebound percentage. They're not Houston, and I'm not saying they are. This is not a bad basketball team that BYU finds themselves up against during round 1 of the NCAA tournament. And if Yegor Demon cannot respond to the pressure that they're going to see, this is going to have to be Dallin Hall's show. Dallin's tougher than Yegor. He's not the pro prospect that Yegor is, but Dallin is a seasoned Big 12 point guard that has gone through the rigors of this conference before, and he does not back away from pressure. The same thing goes for Trevin Nell, who's only a spot-up shooter. He could not play against Houston. Kevin pulled him. He played 19 minutes even though he starts. And, Richie could never fully get going. They tried some more downhill drives in the second half as opposed to relying on the 3 because the three-point shot was not falling. They were 6 of 28 from the floor. And they only got to the free throw line 10 times because they could not beat their man on the point of attack. Kaba was the only player that had the strength and athleticism to look like he belonged against Houston. Everybody else was just lost. So I know some BYU fans are upset that they only received a 6 seed. Here's what I would say to that. First of all, y'all are mad about everything all the time. Have you ever been accurately seeded? College football playoff rolls around, we should have been higher. Oh, okay. Now you get a 6 seed, everybody's crying. Okay, look at your non-conference schedule. You played nobody in conference, and that is going to come back to bite you. What are they going to reward you for a win against Queens and Provo? And then the start of conference play was not good. They finished on fire, but here's what I'd say. If I were a BYU fan, I'd be much more excited about the location than the seed. So you're a 6 seed in the East region, but your first couple of games will be in Denver. You can get to Denver from anywhere in Utah in 7 hours. So it's a location where you can travel to and you can go support your team. Now, if you advance on, the reason it's the East region is eventually, if you do get to the Sweet 16, and by the way, I think there's a good shot for BYU to advance to the Sweet 16. They get a pretty weak 3 seed, in my opinion, in Wisconsin if they're able to beat VCU. So, I know you're upset and you feel job because you always do about everything and it's exhausting. But ultimately, I would be more excited about the fact that you're playing in Denver against a good team but not a great team in VCU. Now, there's going to be a little PTSD here. BYU was the 6th seed last year. They played the A10 champ last year. It was Duquesne. And they lost that game as the 6th seed against the A10 champ. VCU just won the A10 regular season and tournament championship. And here's the other thing that I think if you're BYU, maybe I'm making something out of nothing here. There are a ton of rumors that Ryan Odom is taking that Virginia job. He's the head coach of VCU. He was the head coach of Utah State. He's a hell of a coach, man. He's a really, really good coach. But there are already rumors that he has accepted the UVA job, right? And so if that's out there, I would imagine you're going to have a tremendous amount of distractions for the roster in the meantime. Now, back to what VCU does well and why this could be problematic. VCU has 4 seniors in their starting lineup. 3 of those seniors are 5th-year players. 1 of those seniors is a 7th-year player. They have 2 players that have Elite 8 experience, one with Clemson, a grad transfer from Clemson, and the other is escaping me off the top of my head, but another grad transfer who plays for Ryan Odom that was in the Elite 8 like a year ago, okay? So they have great guard play, and they have great experience. Their best player is a former Utah State Aggie named Max Shugla, excuse me, is his name, Shugla. And he was the A10 player of the year. He leads them in points, assists, steals, 3-point field goal percentage, and he is their lead guard, okay? So they've got a bunch of upperclassmen. They're well coached. They've got good guard play, and they have experience from players who have made runs in the NCAA tournament, and they have length, and they guard. Okay, like I said, they have 3 players that are 6'10" in their rotation. They've got Jack Clark, who's a grad transfer, 6'10". Christian Furman is 6'10" as well. And their freshman set a freshman record for block shots at the program. He's actually a Brit. He's from London. And Ryan Odom plays all 3 of these players that are 6'10". So if there's a reason for excitement, if you're a BYU fan, the main reason is if you can get out and play with pace, VCU cannot keep up. And BYU wants to get out and play with pace. It's what they've been all year long. They like to get out and run. One of the things I do like about BYU is they can beat you in a myriad of different ways. But if they can get out and push the pace a little bit, if BYU can get out and push the pace a little bit, and they can force these bigs to get up and down and don't get sucked into a half-court game, which is what VCU wants you to do, I think BYU wins. I don't think they have to necessarily make a ton of threes, but I do think they're going to have to rely upon their spacing and their outside shot because, as I referenced, VCU's bread and butter is getting you in the half court and protecting the rim with their length. And they take away layups and dunks. They actually dare you to shoot threes. And if you're BYU, you say thank you because that's what we do well. The fear is, and this is why this tournament is impossible to predict. I will take the opportunity to encourage you to log on to ESPN700sports.com to play our bracket challenge. The problem is, if it's a one-off, okay, if it's just one game, which is what this tournament is, single elimination, there are a couple things that always throw monkey wrenches in the plans of teams that are favored to win. Number one is health. BYU is healthy outside of Kenan Catchings, who I think has missed 5 games. And honestly, I don't think he's really germane to their success. So if he plays, if he doesn't, if he plays, it's a nice depth piece. I mean, we've seen some games from Kenan this year where he just catches fire randomly. He's a pro prospect, but I'm not sure that he's going to play. But even if he does or doesn't, I'm not sure it's germane to the outcome. So number one is health. And every year, health can derail the run of one of the best teams in college basketball. It might derail the run of the Duke Blue Devils, who are expecting to get Cooper Flagg back, but they're also without one of their bigs moving forward because he dislocated his shoulder in the ACC tournament. And the other is if you just have a night where you cannot hit the broadside of a barn, if you're an outside shooting team that's predicated on the three and your three ball isn't there, what do? Now, for BYU, most games this year, if they're not hitting their three, they've been able to bring in the Fus Traore kid off the bench and feed him down low because he really is a beast. The problem is I think Fus is probably 6'6", if I'm honest. I think they list him as 6'8". I'll look that up real quick. I think they list him as 6'8". Maybe even 6'9", but I've seen the kid a couple of different times, and I'll say he's 6'6". If I had to guess, I would say Fus Traore is 6'6". They list him as 6'6". Never mind, my bad. They list him accurately. Okay, so what does that mean? If you're Traore and you're going up against bigs that aren't necessarily all that big and long because of his footwork and his ability to finish, he's been able to stead the tide for them over the course of this year when they're not hitting their threes because he gets buckets down low. Against VCU, he's got 3 bigs that are in the lineup, oftentimes together, that are all 6'10", okay? So this feels like a game where BYU is going to have Trevin Nell knock down 4 threes, Richie Saunders knock down 3, Yegor Demon not go 1 for 7, get Dawson Baker and Dallin Hall off the bench, Moat Mag, all these guys, Boskovic, who can shoot it from 3, Trey Stewart, who's an excellent defensive player but has knocked down some threes over the past little bit. Like, get those guys open looks, make sure you're knocking down your threes because I don't think you can win a half-court game against VCU with their size and strength. And if BYU is able to get the win, taking on VCU, their matchup, round 2, most likely would be Wisconsin as a 3 seed. And we'll get to this later. I actually think BYU matches up really well with Wisconsin. Wisconsin has to get by Montana. By the time BYU tips off on Thursday, they will know if they're going to play Wisconsin or Montana in round 2. So there you go. We'll get to some of this coming up in a little bit. We'll kind of preview the bracket with more of a macro level. Gavin Peterson's going to roll by the Utah women for the 4th time in 4 years. Our NCAA tournament bound. We'll talk about their matchup with Indiana and the potential with a juggernaut matchup against South Carolina. But before we catch a break, let's welcome in my guy Doug from Farmer and Chemist on a Monday afternoon. Doug, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Spence, thanks, brother. Wish you the same. It's Monday. Feels like it.
Indeed. But I feel good because I slept well last night, Doug, and that's because of you. All right? So you guys have been able to help me over at Farmer and Chemist, and we have a lot of people that I'm sure have tried, Ambien, benzos, whatever it is, heavy sleep meds that can knock you out, but your quality lacks and you feel hungover the next day. How can you help our listeners at Farmer and Chemist to get actually good quality sleep and feel good the next day?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I think we're all, at least those of us that are a certain age, are struggling with this spring forward daylight saving stuff. Just interrupts our natural sleep cycle, and we all know that sleep is super important. So, Farmer and Chemist CBD products with a minor cannabinoid called CBN, and you can have THC or zero THC. Will help you get to rest easier, and if you have to wake up in the night, be able to get right back to sleep. And the best part is no hangover effect, no grogginess, no worries about not being able to drive the next day, or no worries about doing crazy things in the night. Farmer and Chemist natural CBD products are great for sleep with very, very few side effects.
The other product that you guys hooked me up with that I keep in my golf bag is the Problem Solved, spelled, I think it's SALVED, which is this topical cream, Doug, if you run into some sort of physical pain. And it's worked wonders for me. I mean, it is very effective. Before we get to the deal, let's hear about this assistance you have for our listeners that might be in physical pain.
Yeah, I think we're all getting ready to golf. If you watch the Golf Channel and see the golfers that are using CBD, they're using it to reduce inflammation and to calm their nerves just a little bit without any side effects like we were talking about with sleep. So Farmer and Chemist CBD products, Problem Salve specifically, is amazing at relieving inflammation in joints and muscles. And so if you're out and you're starting to golf, the weather is almost good enough across the state, and starting to get some of those sore muscles, then Farmer and Chemist CBD salve is outstanding for relieving minor aches and pains in specific areas where you have some issues.
All right, Doug, before I set you loose, how can our listeners get more information and become educated on your products, and what's the special offer you have for the people that get a hold of you?
Oh, man, the special offer for ESPN 700 listeners is if you go to our website, farmerandchemist.com, or drop in at the store, 7719 South Main Street in historic Midvale, then you get 20% off. So ESPN 700 is the promo code, or mention that in the store for a 20% discount off your entire purchase to help you with sleep and pain and inflammation.
Doug, thank you, sir. Have a great week, okay?
Thank you. Take care.
All right, check them out over at Farmer and Chemist. Really, really good people. They'll take care of you if you're in physical pain or if you need some help sleeping. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Closed on Sundays. More information online at farmerandchemist.com. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Gavin Peterson, head coach of the Utah women, tournament bound. He joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. We're live today at the historic John M. Huntsman Center on a beautiful Monday afternoon here on campus of the University of Utah. We're getting set for the introductory press conference. Alex Jensen, coming up in just less than 2 hours, will be formally introduced as the 17th head coach of the Utah men's basketball program. So stay tuned for that. We're expecting a bunch of Ute legends in the house for the presser tonight. The Utah men will not be in the NCAA tournament, but the Utah women will for the fourth straight time, taking on Indiana on Friday morning at 11:30 a.m. That is on ESPN2. You can, of course, hear the game on our station. We're the home of the Utes, and the head coach of the Utah women, Gavin Peterson, good enough to give us some time on a Monday. Coach, how are you?
Good, doing great. Thanks for having me, and it's all about preparation at this point.
For sure. Luke Combs, you're a country guy, huh?
Yes, sir. When he came to Rice Eccles, me and my family went 2 nights in a row.
Very nice.
And if there was a third, I'd probably been there on the third
there
night, too.
There you go. Gotta love it. Gotta love it, man. Hey, before we get to Indiana, before we get to the tournament as a whole, what's your experience been like? I mean, you took over in circumstances that none of us really saw coming. So I wonder, Coach, what you expected when you took the gig and what you've learned in the months since.
Yeah, I was with you guys. I think I had 48 hours notice before we told our team after we played one more game under Lynn Roberts. And so it kind of caught me off guard. But at the same time, I am humbled, honored, and just thankful for the opportunity to lead this historically tradition-rich program and continuing to build on the legacy that Coach Roberts and myself started, 10 seasons ago. So really fortunate, really humbled, and like I said, just thankful for the opportunity. I'd be lying if I said I had a big plan going into this. I was really, when I got named the head coach, it was about, okay, we had to shore up our recruiting, make sure those commitments stayed true to their commitments, which they did, but we had to kind of re-recruit them. And then we had games Friday, Sunday, and then off to the Cayman Islands. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise that we were staying busy. So all I could really focus on was our current team, our basketball, what we had to do for that opponent. And so that really allowed us, I think, as a team, as a coaching staff, to really kind of get comfortable in the new normal and just kind of pushed on from there. But I really didn't have any expectations or, we're going to have to win this, win that many games. It was, let's do our best, continue to build on what we have, and absolutely, the NCAA tournament was the destination that we were hoping for.
And to continue on this theme a little bit, what you and Coach Rob have built, when I was in school here in the 90s, the expectation was for the men to make the tournament and then to make runs in the tournament. And what you guys have done on the women's side now, your expectation every year is to be a tournament team, isn't it?
Yes, and it's crazy because we've been here now our 10th season. But, yeah, it's amazing to have those expectations now. And it just, goes to show that through recruiting, through the hard work, having a vision and then believing in it and then recruiting to it, if you just stay the course, it takes some time. But if you stay the course, you'll definitely reach that.
I want to stay in that space for a moment. I want to elaborate because, you referenced a decade now, and it was a slow build. It was a long game. It was brick by brick. And Alex Jensen is going to be introduced tonight as the next head coach of the Utah men's basketball program, and he is going to be tasked with a similar build. Mm-hmm. And, look, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what players are coming back. I have no idea who's going to play for them. Mm-hmm. But what would you identify as the key pieces of your build in order to make this the standard and also generate the type of interest that you've generated, because the women's game are experiencing attendance numbers that we've never seen before on campus?
Yeah, it's a great time to be a women's basketball player throughout the country. But, when Lynn and, myself and our director of operations, Kendall Rodriguez, we were the only 3 at the start of this season that are still on staff. Now it's just me and Kendall. But Lynn, we had our meeting, we had our vision, and, year 1 was we wanted to win the community. Year 2, we wanted to win the recruiting battles. And then year 3, we're going to start winning games. And, believe it or not, I thought that first year, Lynn did a tremendous job with her leadership, and we were able to win 18 games. We thought we might have heading into the season, maybe thought we were going to win 8. So the fact that we were able to do that early on, it was easy to kind of pull the community in. So with Alex, I think he's already got that. He's probably one step ahead of us because he has that name recognition. He is an alum. He played here during those great men's basketball days. And so the community is always going to be there and going to rally around him. I think it's just about now creating a culture and then establishing what your non-negotiables are, which we did as a women's basketball program, and then just sticking to that. And yes, there are going to be some ups and downs, but it's not changing with the times. If adversity hits, stick with what you know. You got to have a set of non-negotiables, and Lynn was always big on we're going to protect our culture at all costs, and we have. And that's something I continue to do in terms of continuing this program, and we're going to have a strong culture, great foundation. We're going to have a good bunch of kids that not only can play basketball, but they're great people, great students, and the community is going to be really proud about them.
You referenced the process of, I think you said re-recruiting the players, right? Because you have a lot of talent on your roster. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, and you don't have to get into specifics because what happens behind closed doors happens behind closed doors, but when Coach Rob got this opportunity, which you couldn't say no to, I mean, you understand why she did what she did, obviously. What was that process to ensure some of the top shelf talent on your roster that they are in the right place if they just trust you?
Yeah, I think in college basketball, men, women, it doesn't matter. It really is about the relationship piece. Mm-hmm. I think with Lynn taking that WNBA job with the LA Sparks, I truly believe for the first time maybe in those recruits and their families, they saw the business side of things. So what I had to do was I had to, rally our staff. We had to get kind of everybody back on board in terms of, okay, this is our vision, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to continue to do. And then we just had to make sure that at the end of the day, our recruits heard from us face to face in terms of the relationships we already have established. That's not going to change. Lynn has moved on, and again, we were happy for her. I'm excited to see her leave her mark in the professional ranks. And for us here, it's just, again, continuing that legacy, continuing building on our culture and our success here in basketball. And it was, again, I had to remind them and just lean back on the relationships that we have built over the couple years recruiting these kids. And, they all got to see that side of us again. And they felt confident and comfortable with us, and we just locked them in.
You're a head coach now, and I don't want to put you in any sort of a box. But if my memory serves me correctly, when Coach Rob was the head coach, you were kind of in charge of the defense, right? That was kind of your deal, right? That was kind of your role, I guess. I mean, maybe that was just what we were told, right? So I'm wondering how your approach has changed after moving over one seat, if at all.
Yeah, we worked really well together. I mean, this was the start of our 12th season together, Lynn and myself. So we work really well together. We still have a great relationship. She'll text me, I'll call her, text her, and she always checks in on me, which I really appreciate. But in terms of now sliding over a chair, I'm now responsible for calling our offense, having an offensive game plan put together, whereas in the past I was just Mr. Suggestion. It's easy to suggest, harder to, make a decision with not necessarily having the result-based, factor determining those decisions. So that's been the hardest part, and, I have a great staff in Ryan Larson, who we got away from Wyoming 6 games into the year, Jordan Sullivan and Morgan Bailey, and they do a great job of continuing to prep our team. So they pick up a lot of the slack now on the defensive side for our team, but it's a lot of all hands on deck. And now I find myself spending a lot more time offensive game planning and getting our kids in the right position to continue to play the style of play that got our fans and everybody excited about Utah women's basketball.
So like most every team in college basketball, your season has ebbed and it's flowed. And, more success than not, 22-8, 13-5 in conference is a fine year. Here's how I'll pose the question. When you guys are flying, when you're running through, 2 of your winning streaks that were more than 5 games, What are you doing well? And when it goes the other way, what are some things that maybe you lose sight of, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think during those stretches in the season, obviously the opponents too play a big factor. But I do feel when we are flowing, we are moving the ball offensively. We are not allowing our defensive success or, non-success affect our offense. When that happens, those were when we had some bad games where maybe we weren't getting the stops that we were getting a week earlier. Maybe because the opponent is that much better. But we allowed the defense and maybe other teams scoring. We were allowing that to kind of affect our offensive rhythm and offensive flow, and I think we kind of maybe started to overthink a little bit, play a little passive on our heels, and that's not when we're kind of average, if you ask me. But when we are firing, running, end line to end line, and pushing our pace, taking shots that are good shots for us, and we're just playing fearless and confident, that's when we're at our best.
You ran through a good streak before the end of the year where you did lose 3 of 5. And to your point, I never want to take credit away from an opponent. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, good teams. I think the Texas Tech game is the one that people were a little bit confused about because you're a superior team. I think you play them 10 times, you probably win 9. But any concern heading into the tournament, coming off a stretch in which you lost 3 of your last 5?
Yeah, I think the West Virginia game was an interesting trip. Just it's a hard place to play, and if you take a deep dive into their numbers, like they're really unbeatable at home. So that was like a wow, welcome to the Big 12 moment for us towards the end of the year. The Oklahoma State game at home, that one hurt. We're leading for the majority of the game. I think we were probably leading close to 35 minutes, and then they took the lead, and we weren't able to get that lead back towards the end of the game. And then, Texas Tech, we looked ourselves in the mirror, our coaching staff, our players, and I think, to be brutally honest, I think we were playing with a lot of pressure, and we were playing not to lose. And you could see it on my face as a coach. You could see it on our faces of our players. And so I had to remind myself, and, I told them that I'm going to be better in that regard. I'm not going to be trying to give that negative type of energy in a must-win situation. It's like, we're playing basketball at the end of the day. It's like nothing is a must-win game. It's you want to win, and you're playing to win. So that's what I got to remind, our coaching staff, myself included, and our players. Just, let's go play to win. Let's be fearless. We know how to play basketball the right way because we've done it over a long period of time. We have a lot of experience. Our senior leadership is phenomenal. Our upperclassmen are very good in what they do. And so just relying on that and having fun with the moment and let it fly.
So your reward for your season is, like I referenced, the 4th straight NCAA berth in 4 years now for the Utah women. You're taking on Indiana. You're the 8th seed. Indiana's the 9th seed. Their head coach, Terry Morin's been there for a decade now, since 2014. So let's start with, and look, we all watch the live feed, so we all saw that you acted excited. I don't know that I've ever seen one of those live shots where a team's like bummed out. No, you're supposed to act excited. You're in, and that's the bottom line. It's a tough region. We'll get to that. But what was your reaction when you saw the seed and you saw the matchup?
Yeah, I think it's always refreshing to play a team that you haven't played before either. That is part of the excitement. And then when we get to go to Columbia, South Carolina, like I've said before, like that is the premier destination right now in women's basketball. They are women's basketball fans. They will be there for our game, and I'm hoping they remember us from a couple years ago when we played them at the Mohegan Sun. And even though we don't have Alyssa Peely, we do have a lot of the same players in uniform. So I hope that we get a little bit of their support in that earlier game. And it's going to be a great atmosphere, and our kids, I want them to embrace it. And again, I think this senior class, their 4th straight NCAA tournament, and they've also won every first-round game that they've played. So it's kind of cool that they're continuing to leave their legacy and leave their mark. And, our charge is to continue this. And like I said to the audience last night at our selection show parties, like, we want to host. And so we're going to work hard in the off season, and so next year, fast forward a year, hopefully we're doing this again, and maybe we get a host.
Do you like the dynamic of a team hosting juxtaposed to the way the men do it? I mean, do you have a preference, or is it just like, this is our format, so I'm just going to embrace it?
Yeah, well, I think with the growth of women's basketball, it's worth them revisiting it in due time. But I think right now, it's a proven method where you're filling the stands, and that's what, all the players, all the coaching staffs, they want to play in front of a packed house. And so it is what it is. But also at the same time now, you have 1 through 16, they're hosting, but you have 17 through 32 that on any given night, it's gotten a lot more competitive on the women's side, where I remember, 24 years ago, it was UConn, Tennessee, Stanford. That was it.
Yeah.
And so now, over the years, it's kind of more and more teams now. You can throw in a Texas. You can throw in an LSU. Obviously, South Carolina, your perennial national champions or your perennial Final Four appearance makers. Like, there are so many really, really good teams. And in the Big 12, Baylor, TCU this year, who knows? So I think I like the way it is right now, and the continued growth of women's basketball. Then maybe you might be able to do something along the men's side.
Let me ask you about that, because I have a brother, and he and his wife live in Carmel, Indiana, and they have 6 children, and they have Fever season tickets. And they have their boys, who are teenage boys, have Caitlin Clark jerseys. And the little girl, Martha May, loves basketball. She's 7. She loves Caitlin Clark, but from my perspective, growing up around pro sports and being in this industry for 20 years, it's one thing to have like a seminal moment when Cheryl Miller goes for $1 million, or Cheryl Swoops is, Diana Taurasi. You have all these moments where these players rise up and you win a gold medal or what have you. This feels like it's different. It feels like it's – and look, valuations are different for women's soccer teams and women's basketball teams. They're going for tens of millions of dollars. The ratings, the numbers say what they say. Everybody – and I don't know what you make of the Caitlin Clark topic. From a media side of things, sometimes it gets a little exhausting because you can tell there are people chiming in on women's basketball that have never watched a second of it. But it's pretty undeniable that there is something happening with your sport and this genre that isn't just a snapshot. Is that fair to say? What's your prism on this?
I believe so. And, to take it a step further, I think before Caitlin Clark, you had Sabrina Ionescu at Oregon. And she was, on ESPN. It was the triple-double watch. And then her senior year, that tournament gets cut short by COVID. So it was already, I think, along those lines and that trajectory of, on the rise. And then I think with Caitlin Clark coming in and then just doing what she did on the basketball court and helping Iowa to the stage and that level that program is on now, I think, a lot of credit goes to her. But I also do feel like there are a lot of great players that have paid their dues, and, they were the ones crawling and walking, and now Caitlin Clark and the rest of that generation, they get to run off with it. And I think basketball is in a great place. You have a lot of great stories in women's basketball at the collegiate level. In Juju Watkins, you got Paige Beckers. You just got Hannah Hidalgo, who we played in the Cayman Islands. Like, those players are tremendous, and our game is going to be in good hands as they become pros in the next 3 to 4 years.
All right, Coach, before I set you loose, Gavin Peterson is with us. The Utah women take on Indiana on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m., ESPN2 for the TV side, our station for the radio side. I know we're focused on Indiana.
Yes.
I get it. That's all we care about, right? We're just focused on Indiana, because if you can't beat Indiana, you wouldn't have what I would perceive to be a great opportunity. And I like the way you articulated this when we were chatting off air. And a great opportunity would be facing what Don Staley has built. Like I said, Indiana. You're a coach. I know how you people think. But how do you get your girls to say, look, we're only focused on Indiana and not what the next round could bring?
Yeah, no, I think our kids are pretty locked in to the next opponent. It's kind of been that way all season. So it'd really shock me if we started to look ahead. So I think our coaching staff will do a good job of making sure we are narrow-focused, laser-focused in on Indiana. But, to think ahead, it would just be an amazing opportunity for us to play at South Carolina against South Carolina, um, just that atmosphere is going to be amazing. And it just gives us kind of a glimpse of this is still kind of the goal. This is what you want. I can still remember our Stanford game here a couple years ago, 10,000 people, and I had a pinch me moment during that game. So there's something we want to continue to build this program here at Utah, and what better way to go look at Dawn Staley and her program and take a look at like what they got going on there and be like, all right, let's try to deliver that to Salt Lake City, Utah, home of the Utah Utes.
For sure. Hey, congrats on a great year. Thanks for stopping by, and good luck Friday.
Thank you so much.
Good luck only against Indiana, Coach.
Awesome.
All right? Gavin Peterson, the head coach of Utah Women, brought to you today by Advanced Windows, which is Utah's #1 window replacement company. Our guy Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, former Ute great. You can get up to $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local Salt Lake company. Good people. Nate Orchard, Jake Weber. Great families. They're here to take care of you and this community. So call Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100 or visit advancedwindows.com. Don't miss out on $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. So give our guy, Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, a call today at 801-850-9100. You won't regret it. Advanced Window Products, building, installing, and guaranteeing the best windows in Utah. All right, we are live today at the historic John M. Huntsman Center on a beautiful Monday afternoon on the beautiful campus of the University of Utah, where Alex Jensen will be introduced tonight as the 17th head coach of the Utah men's basketball program, a guy who knows how very, very well. Richard Smith will join us coming up on the other side on a Monday Drive right here on ESPN 700. damn it, this Monday afternoon. By the way, breaking news, the 76ers are shutting down Paul George for the rest of the season. NBA basketball, where a quarter of the teams aren't serious. We're live today at the John M. Huntsman Center in preparation for the historic day, the introduction of Alex Jensen, the 17th head coach of the Utah men's basketball program. Our next guest is well qualified to talk about the hire. He worked with him at the Jazz. Smitty also knows the biorhythms of the University of Utah. Richard Smith on a Monday afternoon. Smitty, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Spence, we're doing good. Appreciate you having me on. It's fun to be able to be on with you on a day when one of my good friends is getting introduced as the head coach of the University of Utah. It's a great day for him, but even better day probably for the university.
So let's dig into it, Smitty. As I referenced, you spent a number of years with the Utah Jazz, 40 in total, and I believe 9 of those you were a co-worker with Alex Jensen, who was the lead assistant under Quinn Snyder. And then Alex spent 1 year with Will Hardy before heading down to Dallas. What do we need to know? What should we know about Alex Jensen, the coach and the person? As somebody who worked closely with him, what would you say to our community about what they should know about their new head coach?
Well, first of all, I've known Alex ever since he was a player at the U for Rick Majerus, and of course, then he played overseas for a number of years, and then when he came back and got into coaching, he actually was working with Coach Majerus at St. Louis University, and then ended up going to the G League and being an NBA G League Coach of the Year while he was there before he got to the Jazz, and he's not only got a great basketball resume, but he's got all of obviously his roots, here in the state of Utah. He's a Centerville guy, Viewmont grad, University of Utah grad, all WAC player. He's just he's a solid guy. He's a solid basketball guy. He's a guy who's going to get into the homes of a lot of recruits. Especially in the western region of the United States, and I think that's probably one of the main things that the University of Utah needs right now is someone who's, as you're looking at what BYU has been able to do the last couple of years with Mark Pope and now with Kevin Young in their recruiting base, and with all of this NIL stuff going on, one of the things that the University of Utah probably has fallen behind on is just the ability to recruit the players they need to compete in a conference like the Big 12 and hopefully for them be able to get themselves back in a national stage at some point. And I think Alex Jensen has all the credentials and all the background to be able to do that. And that's been I think the big crux of what the U's issues have been for the men's basketball program in recent years.
So a lot of good stuff there, Smitty. I wonder how you would characterize, because we've been talking about reasonable expectations right away for Alex, and this is a question as we sit here on St. Patrick's Day. It's difficult to fully answer because there are a number of months before the start of next year, and we have no idea who's going to play for Alex. We don't know how many of these young men that are on the roster now will come back. We don't know who he's going to bring in, transfer portal, recruiting, what have you, but from your perspective, as somebody who's been around this game for decades and decades, what would you say to the community about what a reasonable expectation is year one as Alex is the head coach?
Well, you'll see a team that's going to be steeped in the fundamentals. That's what he grew up on, playing for Coach Majerus. And then when he, in his coaching career, when he was in the G League, he was not only the G League Coach of the Year, but he also they had the best defensive team in the G League. And so you combine that with then his work with Quinn Snyder and the Jazz, and when they had the Mitchell Gobert teams, those teams really got after it. They were top 5 defensive teams for a number of years. And so you're going to see a team that works hard, a team that has all the defensive fundamentals in place. The thing that they're going to have to, solve is the issue of getting talent. And that's really what it is. Craig Smith, is a terrific coach. He had hardworking teams at the U in his 4 years there. He obviously showed before that his ability to be able to win games at Utah State and the previous schools he was at. He just didn't have the horses, to be able to compete, at the Big 12 level at the way that they wanted him to. That's what Alex's biggest deal is going to have to be, is to surround himself with a group of people, coaches, NIL people, the people on your staff that can help you to get the players that you need to be able to compete. The coaching will be there. The basketball component will be present. They're just going to have to be able to get the players they need who have the talent and the skill level to be able to play and be able to win at that level. Once they get the personnel in place, then you'll be able to see a team that's making progress and a team that's going to have the chance to have a lot of success.
From your vantage point, Smitty, I've been talking about this today with our guests and, a lot of people here at the Huntsman Center. Whatever part of the ecosystem you kind of exist in with the University of Utah, if you're a former player, if you're an alum, if you're a current student, if you are a booster, if you're a season ticket holder, or if you just go to games or if you cover games like we do on the media side, it feels like this has been a decision from Mark Harlan that has been widely, I should say, and consistently applauded as the right move. Does it feel that way to you? I mean, this is a basketball community that's badly in need of some sort of shot of life, and it kind of feels like the Alex Jensen news has been a little bit of that shot that maybe this community needs.
Yeah, well, he's a guy that everybody in the community knows. They know of his background. He's not a guy who's coming in, from the outside, who's trying to ingratiate himself with the fan base or get people to know who he is. Everybody knows Alex. He's a homegrown guy, but at the same time, sometimes those things also come, with their own set of circumstances that you as the individual, have to overcome. People know what he's about. They know what kind of a coach, what kind of personality he has. They know how he's approached his career, all along. And so there's not a getting to know you period with him in that regard. What it's going to take is the patience of the Utah fan base to understand that you don't just do this overnight. You have to have the players. And I know I'm being redundant in saying that, but that's the one issue that the U has had, is being able to get those guys at that level. You see all the excitement that's been created in Provo, with the recruiting, the players they had. Mark Pope did a terrific job, parlayed that into, even a bigger time job at a blue blood like Kentucky. They got Kevin Young to come from the NBA. Kevin Young has installed his own offense down there in his own program in the eyes of running it like an NBA type program. Alex is going to have to compete with that, and in order to do that, he's going to be able to have the opportunity to get the kind of players who can come in and do that. I mean, BYU doesn't just go out and get the number one so-called rated recruit out of high school who's from Boston, Massachusetts, and have him happen to come to Provo, Utah. Like, that doesn't just happen. That's something that's embedded in how they're approaching the job that they're doing down there. And Alex and his staff at the U is going to have to look at it with that kind of mindset to be able to figure out how they can go about creating that kind of excitement in their program, to want to have players around the country who want to look at Utah and want to come and be part of the history and the fabric that Utah basketball has been for so long in this community.
Let me ask you, Smitty, and Richard Smith is with us, 40 years with the Jazz front office, 9 of those years spent working with Alex Jensen. A lot of conversation about what Alex's staff is going to look like. And I'm old enough to remember when Jerry Sloan had 2 assistant coaches and Don Magic Finger Sparks was the trainer and TC, and away we go, and we're good. That's all we need. Well, now there is a traveling party where the coaches take up an entire wing of the plane. It's a different day and age. And I've said before, and I have no problem saying this, I know that Ute fans might get in their feelings about whether or not they should copy what BYU has done. Well, I think they should. And Kevin's staff is comprised of former NBA and G League coaches on the bench. It's comprised of former NBA people in their strength and conditioning office. It's comprised of a nutritionist that followed Kevin from the Phoenix Suns. And there are a lot of conversation about Andre Miller, who's coaching the G League right now. There's some other names out there. But generally speaking, Smitty, what sort of staff would you like to see Alex surround himself with to give him the best chance to make this thing right?
Well, he's gonna be able to get the kind of people he wants to be able to work with him and have the same mindset and the same vision that he has. The thing that boils down to Spence is as simplistic as it sounds, and much to my chagrin, because I don't like saying this, but you have to, in this day and age in college basketball, you have to have the financial backing in your NIL and your approach to be able to get players from a financial standpoint. That's just the reality of what it is now. I don't think that's going to be sustainable myself personally. As a side note, I think that's going to have to change at some point in the near future. I don't think college basketball can keep going down that road. But at the current time, that's what the lay of the land is. So if you don't have the money and you don't have the resources to be able to attract kids, because that's how kids are coming up now, whether we like it or not. The kids who are sophomores, juniors, going into their senior year of high school now, they're looking at programs and saying, how can that program benefit me as an individual? Can it help me with my skill set and my talent get to a possible next level, which would be playing professionally? And also, while I'm doing that, what are they going to do for me personally in terms of financial rewards? And so that's just the reality of it. And so unless the U has that platform to operate from, and then they have a staff that shows that they can help you to progress, they can help you to improve your ability to be able to continue playing and maybe get a career out of this sport, then you're going to have a hard time. You're going to be always swimming upstream. And that's what he's going to be dealing with now. So I would assume, and I don't know this, Alex and I have texted back and forth since he got the job, but we haven't talked personally. But he's going to have. I'm sure he took the job with the knowledge that I'm going to have that kind of support and those kinds of resources to help me to get on that kind of a playing field, and then from there we can take it, to where we need to in terms of the basketball stuff. But the recruiting, getting eyes on your program and getting interest in your program from players like that and from players in the transfer portal, all that stuff, you're going to have to attract them by the money that you have available and also the staff that you have around you to help those individuals feel like they can come and improve and get themselves into a better situation, in their lives going forward. That's what he's going to have to be dealing with coming up in the near future.
I know you actually just kind of answered what I'm about to ask you again, but I do want to elaborate on it because I feel like Alex taking the job, Smitty, is an indicator that things are good financially, economically, and the state of the athletic department and what Mark Harlan and whoever else promised Alex that they would allocate towards his success. Do you read it the same way? Because I've been told by more than a few people that Dallas liked Alex and they wanted Alex to stay, and Alex and Natalie enjoyed living in Dallas. Like, I don't think this was a desperation job grab from a guy who had a job that he liked an awful lot. So the fact that he simply just took the job, doesn't that indicate to you that the promises that were made are, in place as far as the economic viability of where this program is?
Well, I would think so. I would think he wouldn't go into a job where he thought that it's going to be really an uphill climb for him and that he's going to have a hard time getting to any kind of a level of success. So that would seem to be, part and parcel with the decision to take the offer that the University of Utah gave him. I do think that the rich history of the program, he's going to have people who have some kind of a profile around him or present that to prospective recruits in a way that they feel like that's enticing and that's exciting for them. And I would not be surprised if he was leaning on the Rick Majerus years in some way, whether that's bringing back players, former players who are in the business. You mentioned an Andre Miller, guys who can get, high school kids to at least look at the program and sit down and talk to them, that kind of thing. But also setting up a program where kids feel like, again, whether Utah fans want to admit it or not, BYU has gotten ahead of the curve on setting up what they have. And so they've attracted and look, there's kids who are going to look at that program and say, hey, they can help me a lot by how they've got it set up and how they're approaching their program and their skill development work and all those kinds of things. But you also have to play into the fact that these kids are also deciding to go to a school, that's a church-related school that's in a small town. It's a college town in Provo. And, sometimes that works for you and sometimes that works against you. Now, the University of Utah is in a bigger city. It's a public school. It's got 15,000 seats. It's got a historic venue that they play in. They've got a rich tradition. Alex I would think, is going to look to lean on all of those kinds of things that he can sell to recruits, and the fact that they're right down the street, literally from an NBA team, and that recruits, should be looking at that as an opportunity to come play in a setting where they can get not only the personal and career development that they might be looking for, but also be able to make connections and do the things that you do within a program to try and help you as an individual for when your playing days are over. And so I would think that those are some of the main things that he'll be leaning on to try and sell as he tries to figure out how to go about the recruiting game.
On the BYU side of things, and I agree, you can get salty that maybe BYU was ahead of the curve on this stuff, but it doesn't look. It doesn't matter what level. I mean, for years and years and years, I've heard front offices openly talk about copycat formulas to try to figure out what one team is doing really well. How can we get some of that? So complain about BYU figuring it out all you want, but they seem to be ahead of the curve with a couple of different things. And as you articulated earlier very well, it's been a good run for them and doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Now, I know some BYU fans were upset with the 6th seed because if it's a day that ends with Y, BYU fans are upset about something, whether it's the CFP rankings or their 6th seed. I think you embrace the seed personally because of the location as opposed to being a 5 seed out east or something. They're in Denver. But they get a VCU team, Smitty, coached by Ryan Odom, that has veteran guys. They have 4 seniors in their starting lineup. 3 of those seniors are 5th-year guys. One of them is a 7th-year guy. They have 2 players, 2 transfers on their roster that have experienced Elite Eights. They have the A-10 player of the year that played at Utah State, who's a good guard. They've got good guard play. 3 players, 6'10" in the rotation. Like, BYU's a 3.5-point favorite, right? And so this is not an easy matchup, but at least it's Denver, and the location I think is good, even maybe the seed not, what BYU fans were hoping for. But what do you make of this matchup that Kevin's up against first round, and is BYU built to maybe advance, for the first time since the Jimmer Fredette years, right? I mean, that's the last time they advanced out of the round of 32.
Well, this is a tough match. I think this is one of the tougher matchups in the whole first round of the NCAA tournament. And BYU fans in the state of Utah in general don't follow BCU very much, and that's to be expected. But let me tell you, they are a very good team. Anybody who was paying attention to when Ryan Odom was up at Utah State and the teams that they had there, the couple of years he was there, they're very well coached. They're very disciplined. He's got a veteran group They are a very good team. And, for me, the whole game is going to hinge like it did, like we saw in the Big 12 tournament last week for BYU. They had one night where they hit 18 threes, and they looked really good. And then the next night they were into a buzzsaw defensively in one of the best teams in the country, in my opinion, in Houston, and they couldn't get those same looks, and they couldn't get the same rhythm, they couldn't get the same feel, and you saw what happened to them. And so that game for me Thursday is going to boil down to whether BYU can create the looks that they want and have them in some kind of a rhythm where they feel comfortable taking them, and they're going to have to make 12, 13, 14 threes to be able to win that game. Because if they don't, they're going to struggle because VCU is really good, and VCU is going to come after them. And if BYU thinks that just the seeding thing, should get them by into a next round or something, they're fooling themselves. They're going to have to come ready to go and really have to grind out. And the Houston game may be a help to them. They may look at that and, be coming back with their tail between their legs saying, well, they really showed us, what we need to do to get better and get better in a hurry. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short appearance in the NCAA tournament. So that's going to be, for me, one of the more interesting games, not just because I have a rooting interest in for the local team, but it's going to be a very good contest between two very well-coached teams.
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying VCU is Houston, not even kind of. When I've watched Houston this year, I've found myself feeling sympathy for who they're playing against. I mean, that's their brand of physicality and defensive intensity, but VCU plays with a similar defensive intensity, and they don't extend the pressure full court oftentimes the way that Houston tends to do. But, Smitty, one of the hats you wore over with the Utah Jazz is you did a lot of scouting, and I can see why pro scouts like Yegor Demon. It's obvious because of his measurables and his vision, his ball handling ability, his passing. Like, I get it. But more often than not, it was the Iowa State game in Ames and then the Houston game recently, two examples of Kevin Young pulling Demon for Dallin Hall, who's simply a tougher player. He's just not afraid of pressure. He doesn't kowtow to physicality the way that Demon seems to. And he's a kid, and this is his first year of college hoops. I'm not necessarily knocking on him for it, but if he can't handle VCU's pressure, Kevin's probably going to have to go with Dallin Hall, and maybe we see something similar against VCU that we saw against Houston, because Keba Keita was the only athlete that looked like he belonged on the floor against Houston. So what does BYU do if VCU brings some of that physicality and pressure and their guard line isn't ready for it? Because to your point, like, if they knock down 14, 15 threes, they're going to win. But this tournament is impossible to predict for a couple of different reasons. First of all, sprain ankle, whatever. Injury happens, and then suddenly a team is out. Second of all, one team goes hot from the outside, the other team goes cold, and you get an upset. If BYU's not knocking down threes and their guard play isn't necessarily responding against pressure, what do? I think it could be a little bit of a problem for them.
No, you're exactly right. And they're going to have to figure out a way to be able to really man up and really react in a positive way to the pressure that they're going to feel. Now, again, maybe the Houston game helps them because they played Houston twice this year and got run out both times, against them. So they've got all that film to look at and to figure out. The Demon kid, I like him some as a player, but he's been so inconsistent in his effort this year and his ability, to do the things that I think he's capable of doing skill-wise and talent-wise. But a lot of times he tends to play what I call in second gear and rarely really turns it on, because you can see some plays he makes in games where you go, oh, okay, that's why everybody likes him. But he doesn't do it for me often enough. He's going to have to come in a game like this and say, okay, this is what I'm here for. This is what it's all about. This is why I came from Russia. I stopped off. I was in Madrid for a few years in their youth academy program at Real Madrid. Now I come to Provo, Utah to try and get ready for the NBA. This is where all the eyes are on me. okay, here we go. And this is where you find out when guys show up, if guys have it in them to be able to do that, to be able to have a presence in a game that makes everybody watch and look at you and say, oh, that's the guy who's running the show out here. Because as we know, when you mentioned that Coach Young took him out, puts in Dallin Hall, whatever, that's because at that moment, Coach feels like I got to go with the guy who I know is going to play harder for a longer, sustained period of time. That's what I have in my gut. That's what coaching is about. And that's what we always used to say, Spence, when you got in a tight game, at the end of the game, you'd set up a play for a particular player. And as the players went out on the floor, sometimes the players would talk to each other and go, hey, the coach wanted us to run this play, but we're going to run it a different way. And why is that? It's because the players, when they're on the floor, they know who the real players are. You can fool the fans and sometimes and the broadcasters, whatever. But the players who are on the floor, they know who the real guys are. And a game like this is going to be a big step for someone like Igor Demon to show people that I'm one of the guys. You've been hearing about me. There's some plus talk, minus talk, whatever. But this is a game where I'm going to show you guys this is why I came here, and this is why BYU has me here. So that's going to be an interesting thing for me to watch come Thursday.
Smitty, thank you, my friend, for the time. Where do we find you these days? Are you back in town after your travels? Where are you at?
No, I'm actually spent the last 2 weeks working at the ATP 1000 tennis tournament down in Palm Springs. We had a good time down there, and now I'm traveling. I'm actually in Las Vegas today. On my way Wednesday up to St. George. We're going to have a little 3 days of some golf with a bunch of my buddies down there, and then we'll be back in Salt Lake. We'll be back in the studio next week, Spence, and you'll have to spend a whole hour listening to my dribble.
Well, I cannot wait for it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It is good to be Richard Smith. So enjoy your travels. Thank you for the time, and we'll see you next week, okay?
All right, Spence. Appreciate you, man.
All right, Richard Smith, 40 years with the Utah Jazz, including 9 working side by side with Alex Jensen. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. We got to catch a break. Drive at 5 comes your way next. We're 1 hour away from the introductory press conference introducing Alex Jensen as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time, Monday afternoon. Happy Monday to you. It's been a lovely day today after a little bit of a chilly weekend. In for some, March temperatures is what I'm going to say. We're getting a little snow, little snow and rain tomorrow, chilly, and that's going to warm up throughout the course of the week. And it looks like 60 degrees coming up next week as we are high-speed head to spring. But happy Monday to you, and as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. This program is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. You're tuned into the home of the Utes, ESPN 700. And we are live today at the historic John M. Huntsman Center here on the campus of the University of Utah. Coming your way in about 50 minutes from right now. It is the introductory press conference where Alex Jensen will be introduced as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. And we're live today inside the bowl. Looks like they've got a lot of chairs set up with some white Utah basketball shirts. There's a dais set up. Bill Riley's going to be the MC, the voice of the Utes. And then next to Riles and his mic, there are a couple of seats set up. And if my eyes are not fooling me, it's Mark Harlan and Alex Jensen to be introduced tonight in front of the masses. So stay tuned for that about 50 minutes from right now. Drive at 5 today is brought to you by the 2025 Big 12 Gymnastics Championship. You can watch the best of the best on Saturday, March the 22nd at the Maverick Center. Get your tickets today at maverickcenter.com. So that's the big piece of news today on the show. We've been talking a lot about this upcoming press conference where Alex will be introduced tonight just after 6 o'clock. Other pieces of news and notes, of note is what I should say, on this Monday afternoon. The madness of March is upon us. Brigham Young receives a 6 seed. They're going to take on the 11 seed VCU. That's coming up on Thursday at 2:05 Mountain Time on TNT. And BYU will know their opponent before they tip off, should they get the win against a really good VCU team. BYU opened up as a 3.5-point favorite. This is not some foregone conclusion. Ryan Odom, who coached at Utah State, is now at VCU. And a lot of rumors that Ryan Odom has actually already taken the Virginia job. He is in the running to replace Tony Bennett, who stepped aside from UVA early this season, prior to the start of the year, quite frankly. And so you have to wonder whether or not that's going to be in the background as BYU takes on a VCU team that is very deep. They're very veteran-laden. They have 4 seniors in their starting 5. 3 of those seniors are fifth-year players. One of them is a seventh-year player. None of them are as old as Trevin Nell, so BYU always has the experience in that direction. But VCU, an 11 seed, the A-10 champ. Last year, BYU, the 6 seed, took on the 11 seed Duquesne, the A-10 champ, and we all know how that went. BYU has not won a tournament game since a first 4 win in 2012. BYU has not advanced out of the round of 64 since 2011 when some guy named Fredette was shooting jumpers in Provo. So a tough ask for BYU round 1, but it will be in Denver, so that's a good region to attract a lot of BYU fans down for the game. Utah State earned a 10 seed. They're going to take on the 7 seed UCLA and Mick Cronin, so we do have a couple of local teams dancing. The University of Utah will go to the College Basketball Crown. It is a new postseason tournament with a lot of teams that aren't very good. And, sorry, that's just kind of how it is. Utah Hockey Club got a big win on the road against Vancouver. They remain in the mix for the wild card. They're going to be at Edmonton tomorrow night. Utah Jazz are in action tonight taking on the Chicago Bulls. The Jazz have lost 9 straight basketball games, and they are officially the worst team in the NBA. The 76ers have shut Paul George down for the season. The Cincinnati Bengals agreed to terms with both of their wide receivers, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So it has been a busy Monday show, but the bulk of it has been getting you guys ready for a historic night here at the John M. Huntsman Center. Alex Jensen will be introduced in about 50 minutes from now. So keep it right here. Coming up next, we'll catch up.